Chapter 1. A Glittering Summons. Hercule Poirot sat in his armchair, staring at the Paris journal open on the table. His usual tranquillity was disrupted by an empty pinboard, no new case awaiting his attention. Captain Hastings entered, removing his bowler hat. "Mon ami, you look thoughtful. Has no one sought your detective prowess?" Poirot smiled. "A case has arrived, Hastings." Hastings handed him an envelope sealed with blue wax, bearing a chandelier crest. "It came for you." Poirot opened it and read, "Dear Monsieur Poirot, I request your presence at Beaumont Manor, Dorset. A newly acquired sapphire chandelier has inspired threats and unexplained happenings. We seek your guidance before its unveiling next week. Yours, Rosalind Beaumont." "Threats?" Hastings asked. "Oui. Someone threatens the chandelier. It is no ordinary ornament. A chandelier of sapphires is priceless, perhaps worth more intact than in parts." Poirot paused. "Prepare to depart, Hastings." An hour later, they boarded the train to Dorchester. Hastings stared out at rolling fields dotted with grazing sheep. "There is something splendid about the English countryside, is there not?" he mused. Poirot, peering through the window, replied quietly, "Indeed, Hastings. Yet beneath this pastoral calm, human passions stir. Consider the sapphire chandelier. Its very existence stirs envy and greed. Gems possess a curious power, not merely in their value, but in the perceptions they create." Hastings nodded, sharing his friend's unspoken anticipation. By evening, they reached Beauport Station. A carriage awaited, and a footman bearing the same chandelier crest bowed as they disembarked. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Madame Beaumont awaits." The carriage wound through tree-lined lanes until Beaumont Manor emerged. A stately stone house, ivy climbing its walls. Rosalind Beaumont descended, her posture composed despite anxious eyes. Her dark gown matched her sombre mood. Mr. Banks, the butler, stood nearby. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, welcome," she said. "Thank you for coming." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, please inform us." Rosalind led them to a drawing-room. "Our chandelier arrived 3 nights ago from Ceylon, intended for my engagement ball. That very evening, strange things occurred. Whispering sounds, flickering lights around the chandelier's display, and 2 notes threatening its destruction." She handed Poirot the letters, inscribed with black ink in curling script. Hastings studied them. "Any suspects?" Rosalind hesitated. "My cousin Edgar Beaumont was furious when my father chose my inheritance over his claims. But he has been in London." Poirot said. "We will verify that. Meanwhile, I must see the chandelier itself." Rosalind led them down corridors to the gallery. Mr. Banks opened the doors. Inside, moonlight from a skylight revealed the chandelier atop a velvet-draped pedestal. Its sapphires glistened like captured stars. Poirot circled it, his cane tapping the marble floor. He examined a mounting bracket. A faint scratch marked the bronze. "Notice, Hastings, this scratch suggests it was handled roughly, perhaps during installation or by a curious hand." Hastings nodded. "But what of the threats? Could they be the work of a rival collector?" "Possibly. Or someone within the family. We must also consider that the chandelier may conceal more than gemstones." Poirot tapped a sapphire lightly. Pristine polishing suggests it arrived under secrecy. Poirot lingered a moment longer, observing how the sapphires cast prismatic reflections across the room like fleeting rainbows. He noted the way light fractured on the polished marble floor, and considered how those refracted beams might mislead a casual observer. Something in the chandelier's play of light hinted at deliberate concealment, perhaps a hidden mechanism or a secret compartment. These are the details that distinguish an accident from a deliberate design. Hastings frowned. So the puzzle is not just theft, but motives, family, rivals, history. Exactement. We must explore all angles. Poirot studied the gallery's windows. See this alcove? It could serve as a hiding place to observe the chandelier unseen. Hastings peered, and perhaps strike when no one is watching. Just so, we shall remain vigilant. Poirot turned to Rosalind. Madame, who among your staff has access to the gallery at night? Rosalind bit her lip. Only Mr. Banks or myself. But some servants stay overnight in nearby wings. Poirot's moustache quivered. We will speak with them soon. But first, I wish to examine your father's documents concerning the chandelier. He produced a small leather bag. Where might I find them? In my father's study. The key is here. Rosalind offered him a tiny key shaped like a chandelier. He left this for me before he died. It opens his desk. Poirot nodded and pocketed the key. Then I shall retire to my room and look into these records. Hastings, you may join me. That night, in a modest guest chamber, Poirot studied the ledger and correspondences within a mahogany desk. Details revealed that the chandelier was once rumoured cursed. Several owners in Ceylon had reported misfortunes. Hastings listened as Poirot murmured, "Oui, Hastings. The chandelier's history includes 2 failed auctions, accompanied by whisperings of tragedy. My concern deepens." Hastings grimaced. "Cursed jewels? Ridiculous, surely." Poirot looked up. "Ridiculous, no. Superstition often masks human greed. If someone seeks to profit by scaring the Beaumonts, they might exploit such whispers." Hastings yawned. "So, tomorrow we interview the staff and inspect the gallery's surroundings. I look forward to it. Patience, Hastings. The puzzle will reveal itself in time. But recall that a chandelier of this nature attracts desire. We must unmask those whose desire tips into danger." As they extinguished lamps, a distant owl hooted. Outside, Beaumont Manor lay silent under the moon, and in the gallery the sapphire chandelier waited, its beauty a beacon for possible peril. The first threads of the mystery had been laid. Poirot, eyes alight, resolved to unravel them before the chandelier's unveiling could become its final demise. Chapter 2. Secrets in the Shadows. The next morning, the sun rose over Beaumont Manor in a gentle haze, softening the stone facades and casting long shadows across the dewy lawns. Inside the breakfast room, Poirot sat at a small table, delicately sipping his chocolate, while Hastings poured himself a cup of strong tea. Outside, the clink of silverware hinted at the household stirring to life. "Mon ami," Hastings began, setting his mug down, "you seemed deep in thought when retiring last night. What have you deduced so far?" Poirot laid aside his cup, fingertips lightly touching. "Hastings, while the ledger and letters speak of a curse and threats, there is a human element at play. The chandelier's provenance from Ceylon Its interrupted auctions and whispered misfortunes suggest someone wishes to heighten fear. But fear alone is rarely motive. Greed is the true engine. We will see throughout today which hearts burn with desire to possess those sapphires. Hastings nodded, studying the polished floor. Very well. Shall we begin with Mr. Banks, the butler? Oui. He is the primary guardian of the gallery at night. Poirot rose and placed a single napkin onto his plate, neatly folding it to one side. The butler will reveal much. His loyalty may be commendable, yet every man has weaknesses, even if it is only pride. Moments later, they found Mr. Banks ascending the wide staircase to the second floor. He paused upon recognizing Poirot. "Monsieur, Captain Hastings, I trust you slept well." "Thank you, Banks," Poirot replied politely. "We shall conduct a brief interview in the library. You will accompany us." "Certainly, monsieur." Banks's posture was impeccable, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as he addressed Poirot's moustache. Hastings wondered if this butler feared the detective's scrutiny. In the library, Banks stood arms folded, silent until Poirot spoke. "Monsieur Banks, you have attended this household for many years." "Over 2 decades, monsieur." His voice was measured and courteous. "And you were present when the chandelier arrived?" "Yes, monsieur. I oversaw its removal from the crate. It is a magnificent piece, priceless beyond measure." Poirot nodded, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Tell me, did you inspect it closely? Did you note any peculiarities upon unwrapping a cassier?" Chest rose slightly. "Only that one sapphire near the edge had a minute crack, almost invisible. I pointed it out to Madame Beaumont. She dismissed it, stating it was likely a manufacturing flaw. I myself saw nothing that would impede its brilliance." Poirot leaned forward. "A crack, you say? And this was known to you before the threats arrived?" "Yes, monsieur. But no one spoke of it after. I presumed it inconsequential. The chandelier was to be repaired if needed." "Remarkable." Poirot tapped a finger against the desk. "Banks, were you aware of any animosity between Madame Beaumont and her cousin Edgar?" "Indeed, monsieur. Their disagreement over the estate lasted years. When Lady Beaumont passed away, the fortune was divided, but Edgar felt unduly slighted. He departed for London in anger." "And do you know when he might return?" Deshay hesitated. "I received a letter from him last week. He wrote that he would attend the unveiling of the chandelier, but gave no precise date." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "You have not seen him arrive?" "Not in person, monsieur. I was in the kitchens that afternoon." Poirot rose. "Very good, Banks. Merci." The butler bowed and departed. Hastings, observing Poirot's expression, whispered, "What do you make of him, Poirot? He is precise, yet the minute crack could suggest he handled the chandelier more roughly than he admits. If he discovered that crack, why did he not mention it sooner? Or perhaps he did, and Monsieur Beaumont dismissed him. In any case, this crack may be a clue to who touched the chandelier when they should not have." Hastings took a sip of tea. "Next, Lydia, the maid. She sleeps in the wing off the gallery." "Exactly. We shall speak with her." Poirot moved toward the narrow corridor leading to the servants' quarters. The walls were adorned with portraits of past Beaumont generations, eyes in oil paint following their steps. At the door of the servants' wing, Poirot hesitated before knocking. Lydia answered in her plain cotton apron. Her cheeks were flushed, as though she had just climbed the stairs. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she curtsied, eyes wide. "Madam, may we have a word? We speak of events in the gallery last night." Lydia swallowed. "Yes, monsieur." They entered a small sitting area where a pitcher of water and 2 glasses stood. Hastings noticed her trembling hands as she poured water for Poirot. She offered him a glass with a shy glance. He nodded in thanks, but Poirot's eyes remained fixed on her face. "Lydia, please tell me in your own words what you observed last night." Poirot began gently. "The gallery was locked, was it not?" "Yes, monsieur," she whispered, setting the glass down. "Mr. Banks locks it, then leaves until morning. But last night I could not sleep in my cubicle near the gallery. I heard footsteps, soft, and a breathy whisper that seemed to come from within the room. It sounded like someone muttering to the chandelier, perhaps a prayer or curse." "A voice, you say?" Poirot leaned forward. "Were you certain it was a person, or might it have been the wind?" Lydia shook her head. "I know the wind. This was different. I could hear faint rustle, like someone brushing past the velvet ropes around the pedestal. I was too frightened to approach. Instead, I waited until the voice fell silent." "And did you see anyone?" "No, monsieur. The moonlight shone through the skylight. Yet I saw a shadow flit behind the tapestry, opposite the chandelier. It was too quick for me to identify. Perhaps a servant, or perhaps someone else." Poirot stroked his moustache. "Good. You heard whispering and saw a shadow. That shadow may conceal our culprit, but there is more. What you did not see could be vital. A hidden niche might bookend that hallway." He paused. "Thank you, Lydia. Remain observant, and if you hear or see anything further, let us know at once." Lydia nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. "Yes, monsieur." She backed away respectfully as they left. Hastings exhaled. There is fear in that girl's eyes. Fear, but also truth. Her fear confirms someone entered the gallery despite locks. Now, we must seek our next thread. Poirot led Hastings back into the corridor, lined with ancestral portraits. "Next, we shall stroll through the gardens. If there is a shadow in the gallery, there may be clues outside." They descended a staircase to the rear door, exiting onto a gravel path toward the rose gardens. Morning dew clung to petals, and the scent of damp earth mingled with blossoms. In the distance, the gardener's shed stood half-hidden by climbing ivy. Poirot pointed to the lush hedges bordering the gallery wall. "Observe the ground near that low window. Here, Hastings." He bent, examining a tiny fragment of deep blue glass, the size of a pinhead. He picked it up between thumb and forefinger, studying it under the pale sunlight. "This, mon ami, is a splinter of sapphire, broken from the chandelier. Someone must have handled it carelessly, and it fell here." Hastings knelt beside him. A piece of the gem, so they touched the chandelier, not just threatened it. Exactement. They tested its sturdiness, perhaps to determine if it could be pried loose. It could also be that the crack Banks mentioned is more significant. If one stone was already flawed, a determined hand could break it further to steal it. Hastings frowned. Then Banks' crack and this splinter could be connected. But what of Edgar? He might want the gem. Possibly, but Edgar's letter arrived last week after the chandelier had been installed. The break may have occurred during last night's intrusion. Now, who else knows of the chandelier? The jeweller who polished it. But no one besides the Beaumonts and household staff had access. And yet someone entered. They rose, and Poirot walked deliberately toward the stone wall beneath the gallery's windows. He pressed his ear to the chilled masonry, listening. Hastings joined him. "I hear nothing, Poirot." "Be patient." Poirot's finger traced the mortar lines, then found a small latch concealed by climbing ivy. He turned it. A section of wall shifted, revealing a narrow crawl space. Unseen, n'est-ce pas? A secret alcove. Anyone could slip inside and emerge unseen at the window. He illuminated the dark recess with a silver penlight. "Look, Hastings. Traces of dust disturbed, and a faint footprint in the earth beneath. Someone crouched here, observing the chandelier and waiting for silence." Hastings's eyes widened. "A spy-hole, a laudio," he whispered. "Yes. So the culprit is familiar with the manor's secrets. Likely someone who knows the house well." Poirot paused, reflecting. "Edgar? He studied here as a boy. Perhaps he discovered this secret path then. Or someone else, a long-serving staff member." Hastings tapped his chin. But Lydia and Banks would know of this alcove. Lydia heard whispering. Did she mention seeing the alcove's covering move? I will inquire further. Poirot closed the hidden wall and replaced the ivy. For now, Hastings, we gather these clues. Mr. Banks's crack, Lydia's whispered voice and shadow, and this hidden niche. Our suspects include Edgar Beaumont and those in service who relish forgotten secrets. He pocketed the splinter. Tonight we must stake out the gallery. I wish to see who slips into the shadows. Hastings grinned. Always a pleasure, Poirot. It seems the manor itself holds conspiracies in its very walls. Just so, Hastings. In such estates, where history sleeps in portraits and corridors, echo with memory. The past and present collide. We shall meet danger soon enough, and unveil the truth behind this puzzle of the sapphire chandelier. As they strolled back toward the house, the morning birds chirped above, oblivious to the human secrets lurking in the hush of petals and stone. Beaumont Manor stood serene, but within its walls eyes watched, and Poirot's keen intellect stirred to life, ready to pierce the darkness. Chapter 3. The midnight watch dusk settled over Beaumont Manor with a violet hush, and the manor's windows glowed warmly against the encroaching night. Inside the drawing-room, Poirot and Hastings prepared for their vigil. A single lamp cast a soft glow over the Persian rug, illuminating the map of the gallery laid across the low table. Hastings sipped from his teacup as Poirot arranged two folding chairs in the corner, angled toward the corridor leading to the gallery. "Everything in place?" Hastings asked, sliding the heavy curtains to allow a sliver of moonlight to reveal the corridor beyond. "Très bien," Poirot replied, gently placing a small brass lantern on the floor between them. He tapped his cane on the board. "Observe, Hastings. The alcove we discovered earlier lies just beyond that tapestry. We will sit here, hidden in shadow, and wait for our culprit." Hastings nodded, glancing again at the map. "The gallery corridor is silent except," he gestured toward the door, "for gentle creaking of floorboards and distant pipes. No one will suspect watchers here." "Yes, mon ami. Poirot murmured. "But we must remain vigilant. It is during such seeming stillness that moves of treachery are made." By 9 o'clock the household had retired. Rosalind Beaumont, her dress dark and her expression tense, lingered briefly in the hallway to bid her butler good night. Mr. Banks responded with a curt nod, his face impassive. Once they departed, Poirot beckoned Hastings to follow him through, the archway draped with crimson tapestry. Behind the cloth lay the concealed niche, just wide enough for two astonished gentlemen to crouch and observe. Inside the narrow space, the air smelled faintly of dust and polished wood. The stone floor was cold beneath their knees, but Poirot's keen gaze shone in the dim lantern light. "Place the lantern closer, Hastings," he instructed, "but cast its light downward, so as not to betray our position. We shall watch, listen, and note every sound." Hastings complied, setting the lantern on the floor. Its glow revealed the alcove's rough walls, pocked with age. "We will sit here until midnight," Hastings whispered. "Or until our culprit arrives," Poirot corrected. "Notice how the gallery doors are locked from the outside. Yet someone has managed to slip through this hidden entrance. We must catch that person in the act." Silence enveloped them. The only noise was the distant ticking of the hall clock and the faint rustle of fabric as Hastings shifted. Poirot's eyes remained fixed on the gallery doors at the end of the corridor. "Doze, Hastings?" Poirot chided softly as the younger man nodded, eyelids drooping. "No rest for you tonight. You must remain alert. I try, Poirot, but your presence is so calming that my eyes rebel against wakefulness." Hastings stifled a yawn. Poirot's moustache twitched in amusement. "That is not the time to slumber, Chevalier. If a single creak alerts us to movement, our chance will be lost." The clock chimed 10. The third stroke barely echoed when a soft scrape resonated from the corridor. Poirot raised a finger. Hastings stiffened. "Quelqu'un approche," Poirot breathed. A slender silhouette skulked towards the gallery doors. Poirot steadied himself, peering through the narrow slit between stone and tapestry. The figure paused, crouched low, and drew a small key. It glimmered in the lantern light as it pressed against the lock. Poirot's heart quickened with anticipation. "Observe his hands," Poirot whispered urgently to Hastings. "Not the butler's. Those are slender, almost feminine. Yet the build suggests someone of medium height, neither butler nor maid." Hastings peered, straining to discern features. "Could it be Lydia?" he murmured. "She lies near the gallery. Perhaps she moves under pretence of her duties." Poirot's brow furrowed. "Perhaps, but we shall soon know." The figure turned the key and pushed the gallery doors open, slipping inside. A moment later, the doors closed with a faint click. Silence returned to the corridor. Poirot held his breath. "Now, Hastings," he whispered, "we creep forward, but do not rush. Let me lead." He waved Hastings to follow as he silently pressed the tapestry aside, emerging from the niche. The corridor floor felt smoother beneath his slippered feet. He advanced as Hastings trailed closely, each step measured to avoid the creaking floorboards they had heard earlier. They reached the gallery doors. Poirot gently pushed one open, allowing them entry. The room was bathed in moonlight streaming through the skylight. Every facet of the sapphire chandelier gleamed faintly, as though lit by an unseen glow. Its crystals cast ghostly fragments of colour on the walls. Against the far wall, a single dresser chest held folders and portfolios belonging to the Beaumont estate. A solitary figure knelt beneath the chandelier, head bowed, working methodically. Poirot recognized the shape of Lydia's dress. She wore her apron, and her hair was pinned in a neat chignon, though her shoulders trembled. Lydia paused, lifting a small vial of cleaning solution. She extended her hand to the chandelier, as though to wipe a sapphire. Poirot watched her movements with iron calm. Days earlier, she had denied handling the chandelier at night. Could her words have covered a different intention? "Hold!" Poirot's voice rang out, crisp and unyielding. Lydia gasped and rose, frozen by shock. Her face was pale. Beside her, a small tray held delicate jeweller's tools, tweezers, small, chisels, and a magnifying loupe. The tools glinted ominously in the moonlight. Poirot stepped closer. "Pourquoi, Lydia? You promised no one had entered." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. She lowered her gaze. "Monsieur, I overheard Master Edgar speaking of his plan to remove a sapphire from the chandelier, sell it in London, and return the rest. He spoke behind my door, cursing the family, saying he would avenge his loss. I feared, but did not know how to stop him." Poirot regarded her, expression inscrutable. "You saw him?" Lydia shook her head. "Only heard him, but I believed he would come tonight. I could not sleep, so I fetched these tools from the storeroom, planning to guard the chandelier until I could confront him. I meant no harm." Hastings frowned. "You almost damaged it yourself. The crack near that one sapphire could spread if you applied pressure." "I know, monsieur, but I thought if I stayed close, he would not dare." Lydia's tearful features revealed genuine fear. "I wanted to prove my loyalty to Madame Beaumont." Poirot's gaze softened. "We appreciate your intention, but this is not your burden alone. Now, you must remain here until Master Edgar arrives, so we see exactly what transpires." Lydia wiped her tears and nodded. "Yes, monsieur." But no sooner had she positioned herself beneath the chandelier than a distant creak sounded from the corridor. The hidden alcove latch clicked softly. Poirot gestured to Hastings. "He approaches." They exchanged silent counsel. Hastings would guard the door. Poirot would remain near Lydia. The corridor door swung open. Edgar Beaumont strode in, expression sullen, a flicker of anger marking his features. He carried a small leather satchel. His clothes were dishevelled, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his coat creased. Edgar advanced toward the chandelier, eyes alight with a fierce determination. Hastings stepped forward. "Edgar Beaumont, halt!" His voice resonated powerfully across the marble floor. Edgar paused, turning. His gaze flicked to Poirot and Lydia. "Who are you? What is this?" His voice was rough, edged with desperation. Poirot emerged from the shadows. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my friend Captain Hastings. We understand your grievances, but your plan is ill-advised." He sneered. He opened his satchel, revealing a set of jeweller's pliers, a small mallet, and a cloth. "Enough of your riddles, detective. I know how to extract a sapphire from its mount. One gem will settle my debts. You cannot stop me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Master Edgar, consider the consequences. If you damage the chandelier, you dishonour your family and risk legal ruin. The prize is not worth the risk." Edgar's anger trembled. He glanced at Lydia, then back at Poirot. "I have nothing left here. My share of the inheritance was wasted. I deserve this chandelier. And yet," Poirot countered, voice measured, "this chandelier is a symbol of the Beaumont legacy, a testament to those who came before you. Remove one trifling sapphire, and you shatter more than gemstones. You break the trust placed in you." Edgar's hand tightened on the pliers. For a moment his expression wavered, as though he sensed the weight of Poirot's words. But then frustration surged. He advanced toward the pedestal. "Your words are empty. I will have that gem." Hastings lunged forward, seized Edgar's arm, and twisted him away from the chandelier. Edgar dropped the tools in surprise, his face flushing crimson. He struggled, attempting to break free, but Hastings's grip held firm. Poirot stepped closer, eyes intent. "Monsieur, you see we are prepared. Stand down. We will discuss restitution." Edgar fell silent, chest heaving. Lydia, recovering from her shock, moved to stand behind Poirot. The moonlight cast long, wavering shadows around them, as though the very walls held their breath. Edgar sank to his knees, the fight drained from him. I have nowhere else to turn." Poirot regarded him coolly. "Then you shall remain here until dawn. Tomorrow we speak with Madame Beaumont and Mr. Banks. Let your father's memory guide you, rather than petty resentment." Hastings closed the gallery door, turning the key. Edgar rose slowly, shoulders slumped. Poised, he offered Edgar a steadying hand. "You are safe here. But now, know that the chandelier shall remain intact." Edgar's voice cracked. Perhaps I was wrong." Poirot's eyes softened slightly. "Perhaps now all return to your chambers. Madame awaits answers." As the clock struck midnight, the chandelier's sapphires glistened, unblemished. In that silent moment, Poirot sensed the first threads of redemption weaving through anger and fear. Beaumont Manor exhaled into the night. Tension settled for now. But the true puzzle lingered, one that only dawn's light could reveal fully. Chapter 4. Dawn's Revelations. The first light of dawn filtered through the tall, mullioned windows of the gallery, casting slender beams of pale yellow across the marble floor. Poirot stood near the pedestal where the sapphire chandelier hung, its glass prisms reflecting a muted glow. Lydia Beaumont, having spent the night perched on an antique settee, drifted in and out of uneasy slumber. Edgar Beaumont remained seated on a slender stool, his head bowed and shoulders hunched, the weight of his actions pressed upon him like a heavy shroud. Poirot watched Edgar's profile, noting the tension etched around his tightly pursed lips. Hastings stood nearby, arms crossed, his gaze shifting between Edgar and the chandelier, as though measuring unseen dangers. The chamber was silent except for Lydia's occasional stifled breath and the soft tick of a distant clock. In that fragile stillness, the murmur of waking servants and the stirring of birds outside hinted that the household's routine would soon intrude upon their vigil. "Maintenant," Poirot said quietly, addressing his two companions, "We must prepare for the arrival of Madame Beaumont and Mr. Banks. We shall hold this room until they join us. No one enters without our permission." He gestured towards the corridor door. "Hastings, you will remain here and ensure that the gallery remains undisturbed. Do not let anyone pass." Hastings inclined his head and moved to stand sentinel by the doorway. Lydia stirred, folding her hands demurely in her lap. Edgar lifted his head, his blue eyes rimmed with red. "Monsieur Poirot," he murmured, "I owe you my deepest apologies. My behaviour was disgraceful." Poirot's moustache quivered in a slight smile. "Master Edgar, you are correct to feel remorse. The chandelier, as you see, remains unharmed thanks to our intervention. Yet your resentment toward your cousin and your family cannot continue to fester. Such emotions are the terrain in which misfortune germinates." Edgar closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a laboured breath. "I lost hope, detective. Father's final words praised my sister. He appointed Rosa custodian of the estate. I felt cast aside. The chandelier, its brilliance, seemed a mockery of my loss." Lydia rose, her voice quivering. "Edgar, you have brought shame. I tried to stop you, but you refused to listen. I am ashamed, too, for being part of this." Edgar's gaze softened as he turned to his cousin. "Lydia, you only acted from loyalty to aunt and father. I understand." He stood and approached her. "I am sorry for doubting you. I was blinded by my own anger." Lydia hesitated, but then slipped her hand into his. "Let us both atone by speaking truth." The gallery door opened, and footsteps approached. Poirot motioned Hastings to lift the brass latch. Mr. Banks entered, immaculate as ever in his sombre waistcoat and starched collar. Behind him came Rosalind Beaumont, dressed in a simple morning gown of dusky blue. Her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but her posture remained. Composed, she paused at the threshold, surveying the tableau, her cousin standing beside Lydia, Hastings poised by the door, and Poirot at the chandelier. "Good morning," Mr. Banks intoned, though the warmth in his voice was absent. Rosalind's gaze flicked to Edgar, then to Lydia, then lingered on Poirot's calm yet penetrating presence. "You bid us to come, Monsieur Poirot?" "Oui, madame," Poirot replied, stepping closer to Rosalind. "I trust you rested. I apologize for the intrusion into your night, but we have matters to discuss." Rosalind drew a breath and advanced. "I understand. Please explain what you discovered." Poirot gestured to Edgar. "Madame Beaumont, your cousin, driven by resentment, attempted to remove a sapphire last night. His intention was to sell one gem in London to settle debts. He has admitted as much." Rosalind's eyes widened. She turned to Edgar. "Is this true?" Her voice was a blend of incredulity and hurt. Edgar bowed his head. "It is true, Rosalind. I sought a means to repay the investors who bankrolled my failed business ventures. I believed you and father owed me more than this inheritance." Rosalind's expression hardened. "Owed you? Father trusted me to carry on the estate's legacy. A gemstone cannot replace his love or my stewardship." She turned to Poirot. "And the threats, did they also come from Edgar?" Poirot closed, his eyes briefly. "He denied involvement in the notes, madam. It appears someone else, Perhaps someone wishing to misdirect attention. Yet we shall examine that. For now, Edgar is safe in the gallery to reflect on his actions. Mr. Banks spoke. Madame, shall I ensure that Edgar has water and something to eat? It has been many hours since last light. Rosalind nodded. Yes, but bring only light. Refreshments. We shall move to the drawing-room to continue. She cast one last glance at Edgar, whose face bore the marks of remorse. Come, Edgar, you will follow me. Edgar inclined his head and followed Rosalind, Lydia trailing behind. Hastings proffered a polite nod as they passed. Once the trio departed, Hastings locked the gallery door and returned to stand by Poirot. Rosalind guided Edgar and Lydia into the adjacent drawing-room. The tapestry-draped windows allowed the morning sun to shimmer across the Persian rug, where a low table had been set with tea, toast, and a small tureen of porridge. A nursemaid hovered by, clutching a silver tray. Hastings closed the door gently, leaving them under Poirot's tutelage. Poirot observed their brief interaction. Rosalind seated, Edgar standing uncertainly beside her, Lydia hovering like a concerned attendant. After a moment's pause, Rosalind spoke, her voice measured. Edgar, you will explain to me how this chandelier came to your mind as a means of salvation. Edgar sank onto a chair, shoulders heavy. He picked at the edge of his coat. My ventures failed, and I feared bankruptcy. Father's estate is vast, but he entrusted me with none of it. I felt disowned. In London, creditors hounded me. I was desperate. When I heard of the chandelier's arrival, I thought it a quick solution. I did not intend to destroy the family's honour. I only wanted one sapphire. Then I planned to return the estate's balance. Rosalind's eyes dampened. Return the balance. Do you think money is all that matters? Our father believed in legacy, care for the land and our people. A single gem cannot fulfill that commitment. Lydia spoke gently. Edgar, you did not consider the consequences on Rosalind and me. This chandelier represents our family's history. It will light the grand hall where Mother once danced. Without it, Father said, the memory of our lineage would be incomplete. Edgar lowered his gaze. I see that now. I was blinded by my own failures. Rosalind's voice softened. She reached out, placing her hand on Edgar's. We will help. You recover. I will allocate a portion of Father's funds to settle your debts. But forgiveness requires honesty and humility. You must ask for it, Edgar. Edgar swallowed, nodding. I ask with all my heart. Forgive me, Rosalind, Lydia. I will never bring shame again. Lydia's face brightened with relief. Forgiven, she whispered. Rosalind gave a small, relieved smile. At that, Edgar's shoulders relaxed, tension ebbing from his young frame. Poirot, watching from the open doorway, allowed himself a satisfied nod. Hastings joined him quietly, offering a whisper. It seems family rifts are mended, as well as mysteries are solved. Poirot replied softly, We, Hastings, but the puzzle is not yet complete. Recall the threatening letters, Madame's anxiety, and the crack Banks observed. There may be a second hand involved, someone seeking to exact more than one gemstone. Hastings's brows knitted. You suspect another conspirator. Consider this. Edgar intended to act alone, and did so last night. Yet he denies authoring. The notes and the cracked sapphire could have been enlarged to facilitate removal. Poirot pointed toward the corridor. Let us examine the suspicious crack and consider who might have noticed it and how they could capitalize on it. They retraced their steps to the gallery. Hastings unlocked the door, and they entered. The chandelier glinted in the morning, light, its sapphires gleaming like dewdrops on a spider's web. Poirot approached the pedestal, studying the crystal and the crack Banks had mentioned. He knelt, running a gloved finger along the cracked stone surface. This fissure was deeper than a superficial flaw. It suggests deliberate tampering. Hastings crouched beside him. But Edgar says he only saw the crack after it was installed. Poirot examined the bronze mount. Monsieur Banks claimed the crack was visible when the chandelier arrived. Yet Banks did not alert Madame or investigate. Further, why not? A butler's duty is to protect his mistress's possessions. If he saw a serious crack, why did he not protest? Hastings tapped his chin. So Banks may have known of the crack and kept silent. Did he benefit by knowing of the chandelier's vulnerability? Poirot straightened. Possibly. Mr. Banks's loyalty might mask darker motives. Remember, Lydia heard whispers and saw a shadow. What if Banks orchestrated the threats, hoping Edgar would act rashly? Then the butler might position himself to retrieve damaged components and profit in secret. Hastings frowned. But why risk Edgar's wrath? Banks could have extracted a sapphire on his own, using the alcove entrance. Poirot smiled as though savouring a newly discovered delicacy. Because, mon ami, a rift in the family is a perfect smokescreen. If Edgar removed one gem, suspicion falls on him. The butler remains above reproach. More so, if the chandelier is cracked further, it could be sold abroad by someone with cunning connections. Banks has contacts in London, rare antiquities traders. Hastings's eyes widened at the implication. Do we have proof? Poirot touched the cracked sapphire. We shall require more evidence. But first, Hastings, I suggest we question Mr. Banks directly. He is in the study with Madame Beaumont. I heard her on the stairs speaking to him sternly. They left the gallery and descended to the study. Poirot paused at the threshold, noting Mr. Banks standing with his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of composure. Rosalind stood at the desk, arms crossed, her expression steely. She turned as they entered. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, addressing Poirot. You wished to speak with Banks? Poirot inclined his head. Madame, Mr. Banks, we require further clarification regarding the chandeliers. Condition upon arrival. Let us discuss the crack. Mr. Banks bowed almost imperceptibly. Monsieur Poirot, madame, my observation was limited. The crate had been dented during transit. One sapphire looked to have a hairline fracture. I reported it to madame, who believed it inconsequential. Rosalind's brows knitted. I do not recall asking you about a crack. Mr. Banks hesitated, eyes flicking to her. Forgive me, madame. My concern was that Master Edgar might exploit such a defect. I chose discretion, not to alarm you without certainty. Rosalind's lips thinned. You withheld vital information. The butler's posture stiffened. Madame, I only sought to safeguard the chandelier. I believed that further scrutiny would occur before our ball. Poirot stepped forward, gaze piercing. Monsieur Banks, You say you feared Edgar's exploitation. Yet Edgar's plans were driven by personal debt, not knowledge of this crack. Who informed you of Edgar's intentions prior to last night? Mr. Banks's eyes flickered downward. For a heartbeat, his shoulders slumped as though bearing a secret too heavy to hide. Then he lifted his chin. I did not know until last night. But I observed Master Edgar pacing late in the library. I surmised his devotion to personal matters. I acted preemptively. Poirot's calm voice cut through the motive's veil. And yet, you did not inform Madam or Captain Hastings. Mr. Banks's eyes met Poirot's, steady but laden with something akin to fear. I believed that Master Edgar would succumb to guilt and desist. My priority was to secure the chandelier in such a way that any tampering would be difficult. Poirot studied him intently. Yet you never mentioned the alcove. Mr. Banks hesitated, gaze flickering. I discovered it years ago, when Sir Reginald Beaumont tasked me with refurbishing the gallery. He showed me the secret passage. I have kept it in confidence. Poirot's moustache twitched. And yet last night someone moved within that alcove. Who do you think that was? Mr. Banks swallowed. I do not know, monsieur. I did my best to secure all entrances. Poirot nodded slowly, absorbing the tensions. Monsieur Banks, I thank you. But I must warn you that withholding information undermines trust. If someone else used this alcove, who benefited? Who would gain by further weakening the chandelier? Banks's lips pressed into a thin line. I can only regret my silence, monsieur. I remain loyal to Madame. Rosalind cleared her throat. Poirot, we have learned much. Will you remain here while I summon the gardener? Perhaps footprints or clues remain at the alcove's entrance. Poirot inclined his head. An excellent suggestion, madame. We must examine every angle. For now, let Edgar rest in the gallery. Hastings, fetch Mr. Beaumont's gardener. Ask him to meet us at the rear of the gallery. Hastings nodded and departed. Poirot turned to Rosalind. Madame, may I request that you and Lydia remain here? We must ensure Edgar is not further harassed. Justice must not give way to vendettas. Rosalind offered a gentle nod. Of course, Monsieur Poirot. As Hastings left, the study settled into a hush. Poirot gazed around the room, surveying its dark wood panels and leather-bound books. Each surface breathed secrets. He reflected on the butler's admission. One truth acknowledged, many more perhaps concealed. The chandelier's fragility mirrored the family's unity. A single fracture could shatter trust. And who among them thrived in the fracture? It was now Poirot's task to illuminate that answer before another sapphire disappeared. Or worse, a soul was irreparably wounded. Outside, the gardener's boots crunched on the gravel. Poirot strode to meet him, posture erect, moustache quivering with determination. The puzzle of the sapphire chandelier had revealed its second layer. Trust's betrayal. Dawn's light had cast a revelation, but the greater puzzle still shimmered in the shadows. As the gardener approached, Poirot resolved to let no secret remain hidden before the chandelier's grand unveiling. Chapter 5. Threads in the garden. Hastings returned with the gardener, a wiry man named William Craddock, whose overalls bore faint traces of damp soil. Craddock paused at the study's threshold, wiping his hands on a rag, eyes cautious. Poirot rose from his seat, smoothing his moustache. "Monsieur Craddock, thank you for coming. We wish to examine the exterior of the gallery, where a hidden alcove provides access. Will you guide us?" Craddock gave a curt nod and led them down a narrow passage to the rear of the house. The morning sun had burned away the previous haze, revealing the neatly kept gardens. Rose bushes in full bloom, trellises of climbing ivy, and a gravel path winding around the gallery's stone wall. Hastings followed behind, notebook in hand, while Rosalind and Lydia observed from the study window. Mr. Banks lingered in the hall, his expression inscrutable. Poirot stepped onto the gravel, his gaze sweeping the ground. "Monsieur Craddock, show me where the alcove's entrance lies." Craddock pointed to a section of the gallery wall where the ivy climbed thickly. "Here, monsieur. Last night I noticed something odd. A section of ivy that usually covers completely had been disturbed." Poirot approached, kneeling. He brushed aside stray leaves and ran a gloved finger along the stone mortar. "Indeed, observe these footprints in the soft earth at the base. The print of a boot, size roughly 10, pointed towards the gallery's wall." He traced the outline with his fingertip. "These prints are about 12 hours old, perhaps coinciding with last night's intrusion." He stood examining Craddock's face. "Monsieur Craddock, you maintain these grounds daily. Did you notice anyone else walking here? Anything unusual?" Craddock shifted his weight. "Not until yesterday evening. I was in the greenhouse until nearly 9, watering seedlings. When I left, I saw Edgar pacing by the gallery window. I assumed he worried over that crack you mentioned. I did not see anyone else until this morning when I was pulling weeds, and saw these footprints." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "You say Edgar was near the gallery at 9, yet Lydia heard whispering later, when he should have been in the drawing-room. How do you explain that discrepancy?" Craddock's jaw tensed. I didn't see him last night after 9. I only mentioned where I saw him yesterday. I did not watch him all night, sir." Poirot's gaze remained steady. "Understood. Now, did any other staff enter the gardens after dark? Maidens, stable hands, or perhaps Mr. Banks?" Craddock hesitated. "Mr. Banks did his rounds before retiring. I saw him at the front of the house. The other servants went to their quarters. No one was in the gardens." Poirot stood fully, dusting, his hands lightly. "Very well. That leaves only those who knew of this alcove. Thank you, Monsieur Craddock. You may return to your duties." As Craddock departed, Poirot exhaled slowly. "Hastings, these footprints correspond with a boot we saw earlier in Mr. Banks's closet. I observed them when examining the butler's quarters. The sole pattern matched this print exactly, a fleur-de-lis motif." Hastings' eyes widened. "So Banks walked here last night, but he denies entering." Poirot regarded the ivy-covered wall thoughtfully. "It appears he misled us." Rosalind and Lydia joined them, concern etched in their features. "Monsieur Poirot, what have you discovered?" Rosalind asked. Poirot offered a gentle smile. "Madame, this alcove's footprint matches the pattern found in Banks's boots. He alone could access this secret passage. Furthermore, the crack in the sapphire was known to him upon arrival, yet he did not report it. Instead, he orchestrated events to implicate Edgar, knowing Edgar's resentment would drive him to act rashly." Rosalind's face paled. "You believe Banks contrived the threats to push Edgar into attempting to steal the gemstone?" Exactament. Banks's motive would be clear. If he damaged one sapphire further, he could remove it later unnoticed among the others and offer it to a clandestine buyer. Poirot paused, glancing at Lydia. Madame, Lydia heard whispering in the gallery. It was not Edgar murmuring to the chandelier, but rather Banks, practicing the notes and observations to heighten fear. Lydia's eyes widened in shock. I thought it was a spirit. I heard it near the alcove. Poirot nodded. Banks relied on superstition of the cursed chandelier, exploiting it for his scheme. He sought to drive a wedge between the heirs, then act under cover of chaos. Edgar emerged at that moment from the study, shoulders squared yet regret evident. He drew near. Monsieur Poirot, I overheard. Are you certain of Banks's involvement? Poirot enclosed a small splinter of blue glass in his palm. Master, Edgar, these footprints in the earth, along with the sole pattern, link directly to Mr. Banks. Moreover, only Mr. Banks knew of this alcove's location, revealed by Sir Reginald years ago. He turned to Mr. Banks, who now appeared at the study door, hands folded. Monsieur Banks, why did you not confess upon my questioning? Mr. Banks's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His usual composure cracked. Monsieur Poirot, you have no proof, only supposition. Poirot inclined his head, resolute. Yet we have footprints, the boot pattern, and your knowledge of the passage. If further proof is needed, I shall search your quarters for that boot. He gestured to Hastings, who produced a small notebook. Hastings noted down the evidence. Banks's expression shifted from denial to desperation. You cannot accuse me. I am in service to the Beaumonts. I only sought to protect Madame's property from Edgar's folly. Poirot's voice remained calm. But in protecting, you became the assailant. The crack you saw was superficial. Instead of urging repair, you concealed it to create fear. You forged the notes, planting them in Edgar's handwriting style to incite him. He paused, eyes unwavering. Why did you wish that one sapphire removed? Banks's shoulders sagged. Debt, monsieur. There is a man in London who paid handsomely for rare sapphires. I knew of Edgar's rancour. I exploited it. If Edgar acted and failed, suspicion would not fall on me. I would retrieve the gem afterward without question. Rosalind's voice trembled. You have betrayed our family's trust. Banks bowed his head. Forgive me, madam. I thought no harm would come. I did not intend bloodshed, only a simple gem. Edgar stepped forward. This was a betrayal I never expected from you, Banks. I thought you were loyal. Banks looked up, remorse evident. Please, Master Edgar, I beg your pardon. Edgar toggled between fury and pity. My debts are my fault, Banks, but you used my vulnerabilities for your gain. I will not forget this. Lydia placed a consoling hand on Edgar's arm. Edgar's anger slowly subsided into weary resignation. I understand my own failings, but your betrayal pierces me deeper. Rosalind straightened, eyes cool yet not devoid of anguish. Banks, you will remain in the gallery until the authorities arrive. I shall see to the chandelier's repair. She turned to Poirot. How can I ever repay your guidance, monsieur? Poirot inclined his head. You honour me, madam. Justice merely requires truth. The chandelier's integrity, like family trust, must be preserved. All that remains is to ensure no further tampering occurs. Hastings escorted Banks down the corridor toward the locked gallery. The butler's hands remained clasped, his eyes haunted by regret. Hastings lingered at the doorway to confirm Banks's confinement. "Locked, monsieur. He cannot exit." Edgar and Lydia returned to Rosalind's side. The former's posture had relaxed, though a lingering betrayal shadowed his gaze. Lydia's expression mixed relief and sorrow. Rosalind led them back to the study, where an astonished sense of calm replaced the tension of moments earlier. Poirot lingered by the window, watching Gardener Craddock re-enter the greenhouse. The roses glowed vibrantly beneath the brightening sky, their fragrance drifting on the morning breeze. Poirot's eyes shimmered with satisfaction, yet his mind remained vigilant. He sensed lingering ripples from Banks's deception, small tremors that might yet unsettle the household. "Dadu, our mystery completely solved?" Hastings asked, joining him. Poirot cast a glance toward the chandelier's corridor. "Almost, Hastings. We know the culprit and his motive. Now, we must ensure the chandelier's restoration and that no unseen accomplice lingers." Hastings nodded. "And Edgar and Rosalind, will they reconcile?" Poirot offered a gentle smile. "Time and mutual respect will mend that. Edgar showed remorse and honesty. Rosalind demonstrated forgiveness. That balance of heart and reason parallels the restoration of the chandelier. Each fragile piece must be set anew." A soft knock sounded at the study door. Rosalind entered, followed by Lydia and Edgar. The trio had returned after ensuring the butler's confinement. Rosalind addressed Poirot. "Monsieur, we have summoned a local jeweller to inspect the chandelier. Once the stones are replaced or repaired, the ball may proceed without worry." Poirot inclined his head. "Excellent. I shall remain until the jeweller completes his work. In the meantime, if Edgar requires guidance in settling debts, I am available. And Lydia, be assured your loyalty contributed to our discovery." Lydia offered a shy nod. Edgar stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, I thank you for your understanding and counsel. I vow to live honourably henceforth." Poirot's moustache quivered in satisfaction. "Ma parole, Master Edgar, keep to that vow. Seek no quick gains at the expense of family unity. Should you require moral guidance, I am but a call away." Rosalind inclined her head gratefully. "You have saved not only our chandelier, but our family. How can we ever thank you?" Poirot folded his hands lightly. "A simple invitation to your ball will suffice. Seeing your happiness beneath that chandelier will be gratitude enough." Rosalind's smile brightened. "Then you and Captain Hastings will be our honoured guests." As they departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. "Another mystery resolved, my friend." Poirot's eyes traced the shaft of sunlight falling across the map on the desk. "Yes, Hastings. Yet mysteries like flowers bloom anew. There may be other shadows yet to banish. But for now, we have restored harmony to Beaumont Manor. In due time, every missing thread shall be woven back into the tapestry of truth." Outside, the jeweller's arrival could be heard in the distance, tools clinking as he inspected the chandelier's frame. The manor breathed a collective sigh as dawn's gentle warmth banished the night's treachery. Poirot, standing in serene contemplation, reflected on how a single crooked motive could have unravelled countless lives. But through wit, observation, and unwavering logic, the truth had prevailed. And so, as the sun climbed higher, the Beaumont family prepared to reclaim their legacy, their sapphire chandelier casting promise and light upon all who would gather. Beneath its glow. Chapter 6. The jeweller's verdict morning had fully broken over Beaumont Manor, and its stone walls glowed under an unclouded sky. The rose gardens shimmered with dew, and the scent of blooming jasmine drifted through the air. Inside the great hall, servants bustled about, preparing for the day's tasks, polishing silver, arranging fresh flowers, and dusting furniture. Yet the true focus of attention lay in the gallery, where the sapphire chandelier hung suspended above its velvet-draped pedestal, now absent the slightest imperfection. A knock sounded on the heavy gallery door at precisely 10 o'clock. William Craddock the gardener threw it open to admit a quietly determined man in a dark frock coat and polished leather shoes. The stranger was well past middle age, with silver hair combed back neatly, and keen grey eyes that seemed to appraise every detail at a glance. He introduced himself as Mr. Jacques Favreau, a jeweller of international renown, summoned to inspect and, if necessary, renew the chandelier's precious components. "Monsieur Poirot," Mr. Favreau greeted, inclining, his head with courteous precision. "I trust you are the investigator retained to ensure the chandelier's security." Poirot stepped forward, cane in hand, moustache primed for exercise. "Oui, monsieur. I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We appreciate your prompt arrival. Please, let us proceed at once to the gallery." Hastings, anticipating a fascinating examination, followed closely behind as Mr. Favreau entered the gallery. The jeweller paused on the threshold, taking in the muted daylight filtering through the skylight. The chandelier's sapphire pendants caught the light, casting shifting blue glimmers across the marble floor. "Magnificent," murmured Mr. Favreau, removing a small leather satchel from under his arm and placing it on a side table. "A work of art indeed." He bowed slightly. "Yet I understand there has been recent damage." Poirot gestured to a gleaming magnifying loupe resting on a velvet cushion. "Monsieur Favreau, please examine the chandelier in its present state. Monsieur Craddock, if you would be so kind as to illuminate the fixture with those chairs and lanterns, just so, we may ensure uninterrupted examination." Craddock arranged 2 folding chairs directly beneath the chandelier, and Hastings eased a small brass lantern onto one seat. Its light, combined with Mr. Favreau's own compact lamp, revealed every facet of the sapphire array. Poirot watched in silent fascination as the jeweller mounted a small step-stool and climbed toward the chandelier, loupe in hand. Mr. Favreau's voice was low and measured. He inspected each sapphire in turn, touching them lightly with a gloved finger. Once he'd completed a full circle, he descended the stool and handed the loupe back to Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, I find the cracked sapphire entirely replaced." He tapped his knuckles gently against the closest cluster of gems. "See here, the fracture line is gone. The repair has been executed with skill, but I must adjust a few settings to secure the stone more firmly." He returned to the step-stool, small tools in hand, and worked with precise movements to realign the mounts. Poirot nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Did you find any further fractures or loose stones?" Mr. Favreau stepped down and wiped his brow. "No additional flaws, monsieur. The crack you indicated must have been intermediate. The stone is now whole. However, one pendant exhibited minute abrasion on its surface, nearly imperceptible, but present nonetheless. It must have been handled roughly, possibly by tools of a jeweller's trade. Such abrasions do not occur through ordinary cleaning." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "So, the thief's instruments brushed against it at some point?" Monsieur Favreau inclined his head. "Precisely, and given that the abrasion is adjacent to where the original crack lay, I surmise that after Monsieur Bonk's attempt to widen the crack, someone employed proper tools, perhaps you, Monsieur Poirot, to restore and then slightly polish to conceal traces." Poirot's moustache twitched. "You guessed correctly. I had Lydia borrow these gloves and negotiated with your predecessor to replace that cracked stone. But tell me, does this chandelier appear structurally sound now?" The jeweller examined the bronze mounting, testing its stability with a small mallet. "It is solid. I will apply a thin layer of mounting wax to secure each sapphire further. No movement should occur now. The glass canopy above is intact, and the frame bears no hidden compartments. The piece is restored to pristine condition." Poirot exhaled. "Then we may arrange for removal of the minor evidence, the splinter located in the gardener's plot, and proceed to the ball in confidence." Mr. Favreau wiped his brow again and packed away his tools. "I shall return at the hour before the event to confirm that no further tampering has occurred. In the meantime, Monsieur Poirot, take whatever precautions you deem necessary." "Thank you, monsieur," Poirot replied. "We shall not be lacking vigilance." With a final nod, Mr. Favreau departed through the gallery door, leaving the trio below to resume their duties. As Hastings stepped forward to extinguish the lantern, Rosalind Beaumont and Lydia entered the gallery. Edgar Beaumont waited in the antechamber, his face marked by a calm resolve. The removal of the butler had patched one wound within the family, but shadows of mistrust still lurked in Forsyth Hall. Rosalind's countenance, although composed, bore the faintest worry line between her brows. "Monsieur Poirot," Rosalind greeted, voice hushed as though afraid to disturb the atmosphere. "You requested our presence?" "Yes, madame," Poirot answered. "Now that the chandelier is secure, I would address the final matters of discord. Edgar," he turned to the young man, "you have shown honour in admitting your guilt and renouncing resentment. But what of your future? Have you made arrangements to settle your creditors?" Edgar nodded. "I visited London yesterday. With some help from Hodgson and Smith Bank, I negotiated an extension and small loan, offering the Beaumont estate as collateral. I shall manage my debts responsibly." Lydia gave a whisper of relief. "I am glad, Edgar. I feared you would be forever condemned by poor decisions." Edgar smiled faintly. "I owe much to you and to Rosalind for your forgiveness." He turned to Rosalind. "Thank you for your generosity." Rosalind inclined her head. "I will always shield my family, regardless of errors. But now we must turn our attention outward. Hastings, escort Lydia to the drawing-room. I shall converse with Monsieur Poirot regarding the guest list and seating arrangements for this evening's ball." Hastings bowed and offered Lydia his arm. Together they departed, leaving Rosalind and Poirot alone beneath the chandelier's sense of lingering majesty. Rosalind studied her cousin's determined posture as he descended the steps, and then turned her gaze to Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, do you believe that all danger has now passed?" she asked softly. Poirot folded his hands, eyes reflective. "Madame, the greatest danger was the threat of sabotage from within the household. With Monsieur Banks's removal and the chandelier restored, the immediate peril ends. However, caution is not yet superfluous. A second party, if any, could still harbour resentment, as one never knows what silent grievances remain." Rosalind sighed. "You speak truly. Yet I have faith in the family's unity. If I see that Edgar is steadfast in his resolve, I believe we may overcome any further mischief." Poirot's moustache quivered in agreement. "Faith tempered with watchfulness is a formidable shield." He paused and inhaled. "This evening's ball will cast light upon the hearts of your guests. I trust the employees have been briefed to remain vigilant." Rosalind enclosed her hands, and I have instructed the head butler, Mr. Felworth, to supersede Banks in duties until further notice. All keys have been collected and distributed solely to those of us in trust. "Excellent," Poirot replied. "Now, if I may suggest, permit me to oversee the final inspection an hour before the event. Meanwhile, I shall confer with Hastings regarding the guest list and any names that may pose questions." Rosalind smiled appreciatively. "Anything to ensure we proceed without mishap, dear detective." Poirot bowed. "I am honoured by your confidence." He steered her towards the gallery door. "In the interim, you should rest and prepare. Much remains to do before this night's festivity." Rosalind turned to go, but paused to look skyward through the skylight. The sapphire chandelier, suspended over empty chairs and polished floor, seemed to shimmer with expectancy. Rosalind's eyes glistened with both gratitude and anxiety. "May good fortune follow us tonight," she murmured. Poirot offered a gentle nod. "It shall, provided we remain vigilant." With that, he watched her depart, then followed himself to the drawing-room to confer with Hastings. The drawing-room, door closed softly behind him. Hastings awaited by a finely detailed map of the ballroom, guest list in hand, with Lydia perched on a chaise longue, poring over invitations. "Hastings," Poirot began, "we must review the list carefully. Any names associated with questionable reputations must be noted." Hastings tapped his pen against the paper. "I have alerted you to the recent arrival of Lord Stockwell, who has a reputation for gambling debts, and the Honourable Miss Lillian Merrow, whose family had slighted the Beaumonts years ago." Poirot's moustache bristled with interest. "Indeed, we must observe them, but our priority remains the chandelier and the emotional climate within the family. If tension crops up among the guests, we must be prepared to act." Lydia looked up with wide eyes. "Will I attend the ball, Monsieur Poirot?" "Bien sûr, mademoiselle," Poirot replied. "You will accompany Rosalind as her personal attendant. But remember, you will also stand guard over the family's welfare. Should anything suspicious occur, you must notify us at once." Blinked. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, I shall do so." Poirot smiled, his eyes brightening. "Excellent. Then we have a plan. I shall retire briefly to rest my mind and review my notes. At 6:30, I will reconvene here for final preparations." He tapped his cane on the carpet. "Until then, We wait and watch, like hawks surveying a field." Hastings and Lydia nodded in unison. Poirot gave a final glance toward the map and the guest list, then departed through the oak-panelled door, leaving them to their own tasks. Hastings exhaled. "What a marvel, Hastings," Lydia whispered, moving closer to inspect the invitations. "To witness a ball under the gaze of such a chandelier." Hastings chuckled softly. "It is indeed a privilege, Lydia. Now, let us finalize these seating arrangements." He pointed to a section of the list. "Lord Stockwell here, and Miss Merrow here. We will keep them apart at dinner to minimize any friction." Lydia nodded, her pencil poised over the paper. "Yes, Captain Hastings." Then she paused, as though struck by sudden concern. "Will Edgar attend?" Hastings smiled thoughtfully. "He will. The ball is his family's celebration. His place is beside Rosalind, reaffirming their bond." Lydia's expression softened. "Edgar deserves that chance." Hastings patted her arm. "Indeed he does." He returned to the list, making adjustments. Once finished, they closed their notebooks and rose. Outside in the corridor, servants hurried to and fro, each bearing glassware, candelabras, and trays of fine silver. The stage was set. The final act of this familial drama would unfold under the sapphire chandelier's brilliant radiance. Beaumont Manor awaited its guests, and Poirot, ever watchful, would stand sentinel to ensure that no spark of malevolence could dim the sapphire's glow. By mid-afternoon, the manor's halls were hushed anticipation. In a quiet alcove of the Dieu drawing-room, Poirot and Hastings conferred in low voices over the evening's logistics, while Lydia tended to Rosalind's final preparations in her private dressing-chamber. As the hour of the ball approached, every soul at Beaumont Manor braced for a night of splendour, and perhaps one last test of hearts and intentions, all beneath the incomparable sapphire chandelier. Chapter 7. An evening of splendour and suspicion. Grand double doors of Beaumont Manor swung open to admit a steady stream of elegantly dressed guests, their gowns rustling like silken whispers through the candle-lit foyer. Outside, a crisp evening breeze stirred the lantern flames that lined the stone pathway, guiding each carriage to the gravel courtyard. Inside, a festive hush had settled over the assembled servants, who stood at rigid attention as the first arrivals entered. The chandelier's sapphires, though still awaiting its formal debut in the ballroom, cast a pale blue glow through the gallery windows, foreshadowing the main event of the evening. Hercule Poirot, standing near the gallery's antechamber, adjusted his bow tie and surveyed the scene with meticulous calm. His small frame appeared at ease, despite the undercurrent of tension that accompanied any gathering in which fortunes and reputations might shift. Captain Hastings, tall and congenial, circled among clusters of guests, exchanging pleasantries with genteel enthusiasm. Lydia, attired in a soft lavender dress and discreetly positioned at Rosalind's side, offered gentle assistance to arriving cousins and friends, ensuring that every cloak was taken, every corsage straightened. Rosalind Beaumont herself stood just inside the gallery door, resplendent in a gown of ivory silk with sapphire accents at the bodice, a graceful nod to the evening's centrepiece. Her dark hair was swept up into an elegant chignon, and her eyes, though bright, betrayed a hint of nervous excitement. Edgar Beaumont appeared at her side, steady and composed, wearing a charcoal tuxedo with a sapphire blue cravat. Their hands, brushed as they welcomed guests together, the younger Beaumonts calm a testament to this new evening of reconciliation. Across the hall, Lord Stockwell descended from a sleek black carriage, his tall frame draped in a velvet coat that hinted at both wealth and ostentation. He paused to light a cigar, then stubbed it out with a flick of his gold-tipped boot. His reputation preceded him. A gambling debt as large as some country estates, and an appetite for risk that extended beyond cards to include questionable alliances. His cold blue eyes flicked briefly toward the gallery, as though already calculating whether the chandelier's sapphires could tempt him in some future transaction. Miss Lillian Merrow arrived just moments later, her pale rose gown trailing behind her. She paused on the threshold, surveying the gallery's muted glow as though recalling an old grievance. The Merrow family and the Beaumonts had once been staunch neighbours, until a disagreement over land rights had severed their ties. Miss Merrow's expression was polite, yet her eyes held an undercurrent of rivalry. She approached Rosalind with a measured smile, extending a gloved hand. "Cousin," she said, her tone cool but earnest, "I trust the evening will be most enchanting." Rosalind inclined her head. "Thank you, Lillian. We are honoured by your presence." Though her voice remained cordial, Rosalind's fingertips tightened momentarily around Miss Merrow's hand, as though bracing against a memory of past slights. Within the library, now repurposed as a reception area, guests mingled before ascending the broad staircase to the grand ballroom. Soft notes from a string quartet drifted through the air, accompanied by the gentle tinkle of laughter and polished conversation. Poirot stationed himself near the base of the staircase, where he could observe the ebb and flow of guests. He noted with interest when Lord Stockwell joined Sir Rowland Carmichael, chair of the local hunting club, in animated discussion about the evening's shooting schedule. A discreet flicker of jealousy danced across Sir Rowland's eyes, as though he resented Lord Stockwell's bold manner. Meanwhile, Hastings encountered Mrs. Geraldine Talbot, a warm-hearted widow whose acquaintance with the Beaumonts dated back 8 decades. "Captain Hastings," she exclaimed, extending a gloved hand, "do you know if the chandelier will be revealed tonight? I have long awaited its unveiling." Hastings inclined his head. "Indeed, Mrs. Talbot, Monsieur Poirot and Monsieur Favreau have confirmed its stability. The grand moment will occur midway through the ball, when the first dance is announced. It will be a sight to behold." Mrs. Talbot turned to glance toward the gallery door, her breath catching in a soft sigh of anticipation. As more guests arrived, diplomats, local dignitaries, and extended relatives, Rosalind retreated to oversee the final refinements. Lydia ushered her mother's oldest friend, Lady Pennington, into the drawing-room, ensuring that the Duchess's furs were set aside by a discreet attendant. Lord Pennington, ever the polite counterpart, offered to fetch brandy or claret for the host. "No, thank you," Rosalind insisted. "Everything is in hand." She pointed toward a small table holding fresh flower arrangements and a silver tray of delicate scent vials. "We have provided fragrant oil should anyone wish to freshen. Before the ball." Lady Pennington smiled, her wry expression suggesting keen discernment. "Very thoughtful, dear. One never knows which alliances may shift once the dances begin." Across the hall, Edgar encountered his cousin, Major Henry Beaumont, a cousin by extension, sharing a name but not always a character. Major Beaumont, was an imposing figure in uniform, his chest adorned with medals from conflicts abroad. He offered a firm handshake and a curt nod. "Edgar," he said, voice low and measured, "I admire your courage in standing beside Rosalind this evening. The family has needed a steady hand." Edgar inclined his head. "Thank you, Henry. I aim to make amends." The Major's steely gaze softened somewhat. The family's reputation is most important. Any further hint of scandal would reflect poorly. Edgar smiled faintly. "I understand. Tonight's success is paramount." Meanwhile, at the gallery door, Poirot observed the butler Mr. Felworth, a tall, grave man, ushering guests towards the grand ballroom. By design, the guests would pass through the foyer and into the gallery corridor before entering the ballroom, experiencing the sapphire chandelier's soft prelude from afar. Poirot noted each guest's reaction. Some glanced once, eyes widening in quiet awe. Others lingered, craning their necks to catch any glimpse of the sapphires. A faint hum of admiration rose among them. As the last of the late arrivals made their entrance, Poirot signalled Hastings. They stepped aside slightly to permit a final group, the Beaumont twins from the London branch, to pass. Poirot's keen eyes lingered on the twins, identical in appearance, yet with distinct demeanours. One, Frederick, bore an open, friendly expression, while his brother Albert wore a subtle smirk and possessed a more guarded aura. Hastings leaned close to Poirot and whispered, "Any concerns about the twins?" Poirot's moustache quivered. "Observation only, Hastings. The family branches often carry hidden tensions. Albert's guarded smile suggests a secret, while Frederick's openness conceals nothing but genuine goodwill. We shall keep them in view." Once the gallery passed its last guests, Poirot followed the thrum of conversation through the archway into the grand ballroom. As the doors opened, a gasp of collective wonder echoed through the crowd. There, suspended from the centre of the lofty ceiling, hung the sapphire chandelier at last, its myriad pendants gleaming with inner life. The jeweller's added wax had been removed, and the chandelier spun gently, as though breathing. Each sapphire caught the light of dozens of flickering candles, scattering a kaleidoscope of azure flecks across the polished oak floor. The reflection danced upon marbled columns lining the walls and glinted off the mirrored panels that framed the ballroom. Rosalind and Edgar stood beneath it, arms entwined. Guests paused mid-step, clinking champagne flutes in awe. Lady Pennington murmured, "So exquisite. One wonders if there is ever a jewel more beautiful." Mrs. Talbot dabbed tears from her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "It takes one's breath away." Poirot turned to Hastings. "Notice how the crowd reacts. They are entranced, yes, but I must also watch for those whose admiration turns to calculation." Hastings nodded, his eyes sweeping the assembled party. They saw Lord Stockwell's gaze linger perhaps too long, as though appraising each sapphire's potential market worth. Miss Merrow's expression was more guarded. She offered polite applause, yet her lips remained sealed in a thoughtful line. As the admiration settled into subdued chatter, the orchestra began the opening waltz, a slow, dreamy melody that beckoned couples to the floor. Edgar offered his arm to Lydia with a gentle smile. "Would you honour me, mademoiselle, for the first dance?" He bowed formally. Lydia curtsied with a blush. Captain Hastings, madame, Edgar announced, taking Lydia's hand and stepping into the swirling dancers. Hastings nodded approval. The twins, Frederick and Albert, followed suit, and soon the hall was filled with swirling gowns and polished boots moving in elegant rotation beneath the sapphire splendour. Poirot, standing near a cluster of columns, observed the dancers with practised eyes. Rosalind joined the dance floor as the second waltz commenced, partnered by Major Beaumont. The ballroom's murmur softened into hushed conversation as all eyes settled on the hosting family. Edgar and Lydia glided gracefully, their steps in perfect harmony, a symbol of reconciliation shining under azure light. Frederick and Albert danced beside them. Frederick's laughter was genuine, while Albert's eyes showered glances toward Lord Stockwell and Miss Merrow, as if gauging alliances. Suddenly, midway through the dance, a soft creak interrupted the melody. Lydia felt the floor tilt faintly under her slipper. She glanced upward as high above, one of the sapphire strands seemed to shift. A ripple ran through the crowd as guests' heads turned collectively to watch. The chandelier swayed for the briefest instant, though the movement was almost imperceptible. Then it settled back into place. A collective exhalation of relief swept the ballroom. Edgar guided Lydia through the next turn, while Major Beaumont paused to inspect the ceiling's rigging. "Tell me, Poirot," he said in a low voice, "did you feel that shift? It seemed too deliberate to be mere breeze." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache bristling. "I too sensed a slight movement. Let us not alarm the guests, but we shall investigate as soon as possible." Major Beaumont nodded. Lord Stockwell, overhearing, raised an eyebrow. Fine piece of engineering, this chandelier. Yet one must question its reliability. Imagine if it fell during a dance. Miss Merrow stepped closer to Lord Stockwell, her voice measured. "Imagine, indeed. But Monsieur Favreau assured us it is secure." Lord Stockwell smiled thinly. "True, one hopes his assurances are well-founded." His gaze flicked to Albert Beaumont, who returned the look with a brief smirk. Miss Merrow's brows furrowed, and she pressed her gloved hand to her throat as though stifling a thought. Meanwhile, Hastings appeared at Poirot's side, his face flushed. "Monsieur Poirot," I observed Frederick slip from his partner's side and stroll toward the gallery door. He paused there, as though he intended to inspect the chandelier more closely. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Indeed, Frederick was known for his genuine fascination with gems, unlike Albert, who seems more calculating. We must see what Frederick has in mind. Without hesitation, Poirot led Hastings through the dancers, weaving between guests who bowed and curtsied as they passed. As they approached the gallery door, they spotted Frederick standing with one hand on the knob, leaning in to peer up at the chandelier. "Mr. Beaumont," Poirot called softly, his voice carrying a hint of reproach. Frederick spun at the sound, a startled expression on his face. "Mon Dieu, monsieur, I did not wish to intrude. I was merely curious how the light refracted upon the stones." Poirot offered a gentle nod. "Curiosity is admirable, but consider that an unnoticed misstep could damage the fixture. Remain with me here, and I shall explain the mechanics in due time." Frederick bowed. "Of course, monsieur, forgive me." He stepped back into the ballroom, his cheeks tinged pink. Once Frederick had rejoined a cluster of guests, Hastings turned to Poirot. We must determine whether that creak was a mere structural response to shifting weight or something more sinister. Poirot's moustache quivered. Agreed. We shall speak to Monsieur Favreau and the head of the servants after the fourth dance. For now, we maintain the facade of celebration. He glanced over the ballroom, excitement trembling in every note, laughter floating on every breath, and the chandelier's sapphires glinting like small galaxies overhead. As the orchestra transitioned to a lively quadrille, Rosalind caught Edgar's eye and offered him a warm smile. He bowed and they joined the dance, the music's vivacity echoing their renewed familial harmony. Major Beaumont, catching Poirot's gaze, touched his shoulder. It seems the evening proceeds without further incident. For the moment, at Aestheut least, Poirot inclined his head. Yes, but the next hours will be critical. Watch Lord Stockwell and Miss Merrow. Their interactions may betray more than mere admiration. Major Beaumont nodded gravely. As the dances continued and silvery laughter wove through the air, the chandelier remained a vigilant beacon overhead, its sapphires gleaming like watchful sentinels. Beneath its glow, hearts turned with measured steps, secrets glimmered behind polite smiles, and Poirot's small grey eyes missed nothing. For on a night of splendour, wherein every guest sought to bask in reflected light, the finest mysteries reveal themselves not in darkness, but in the brightest of halls. Chapter 8. Glimmers of Betrayal. The candles in the gallery's antechamber flickered as the last notes of the orchestra's third waltz faded into the distance. Poirot, standing beneath the pale gleam of the chandelier's sapphires, surveyed the assembled guests who lingered on the periphery of the bar and hors d'oeuvres table. Hastings stood at his side, listening intently to muted conversations and laughter that still trembled with excitement. The slight tension that had rippled through the ballroom lingered here, like the echo of a snapped thread threatening to unravel the evening. Poirot's small grey eyes searched the faces of those nearest. Lord Stockwell, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze flicking through the gallery door to the chandelier, as though contemplating its value. Miss Lillian, Merrow, who tapped at her fan with delicate impatience. Albert Beaumont, strolling alone, his expression inscrutable, and Frederick, conversing animatedly with Major Beaumont by the tall windows. Psyches mingled and collided in the warm candlelight, even as the sapphire glow cast prismatic flecks that danced across the marble floor. "Notice the group by the bar, Hastings?" Poirot murmured. "Miss Merrow's composure seems strained. She speaks with Lord Stockwell in hushed tones as though revealing secrets not intended for polite ears. Keep an eye on them." Hastings nodded, shifting slightly to avoid embryonic crowds pressing forward at the invitation of the gallery's open doorway. Moments later, a crisp hush fell upon the gallery as Rosalind reappeared from the ballroom entrance, her ivory gown trailing softly. She paused beside Poirot, offering a gentle nod. "Monsieur Poirot, the fourth waltz begins in 5 minutes. We must ensure that the chandelier remains secure before full attention shifts back to the ballroom." Her voice trembled just enough to betray lingering anxiety. Poirot's moustache quivered. "Quite so, madame. I propose a brief inspection, now, before the crowd thins temporarily." He gestured toward the gallery floor. "Captain Hastings, will you join me? I wish to examine the chains and fastenings." Hastings offered a wry grin. Always happy to oblige. The two men walked deliberately across the smooth marble, weaving between lingering couples who cast curious and occasionally wary glances their way. As Poirot approached the pedestal, he crouched to inspect the bronze mount. Hastings's eyes scanned the surrounding floor for crumbs of evidence. Poirot's gloved fingertips traced a faint smear of grease on one of the chandelier's upper chains, barely visible in the sapphire's pale glow. He tapped the chain gently with the end of his cane. "Hastings, look here. See these grease marks? They have been caused by handling the chain recently, possibly to loosen a link. No one would touch these without a specific purpose." He rose, dusting his gloved hands. Monsieur Favreau said he had secured every link. Yet this chain bears fresh grease. Hastings frowned. That could only mean someone tried to tamper with the chandelier during the ball. But who would dare such a risky move while guests danced beneath it? "Exactly," Poirot replied. "We must determine who had the opportunity and motive. Let us consider who lingered closest to the chandelier after the slight sway we felt earlier." He glanced toward the gallery door, where a small group had paused mid-conversation, their profiles split by the sapphire's glow. Poirot rose fully and beckoned Hastings to follow as he stepped into the corridor. They moved quietly down the hallway, where Lillian Merrow and Lord Stockwell stood conversing so low that only slivers of words reached their ears. "Hasten when the music ends," Lord Stockwell murmured, voice smooth as velvet. "We must not be seen. Timing is everything." Miss Merrow nodded, her fan fluttering as she brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I understand. But you must deliver the letter before the final dance. Mother's reputation cannot suffer another day." Poirot's moustache quivered. "A letter? What letter?" Hastings asked under his breath. Poirot held up a finger. "Continue." Then, in a voice as cold as the sapphires overhead, he called out, "Lord Stockwell! Miss Merrow, pardon me, but you two have not been introduced to Captain Hastings." Both figures startled. Lord Stockwell's eyes darted to Hastings before settling on Poirot's placid expression. "Ah, Captain Hastings indeed." He offered a polite bow. "May I help you?" Poirot inclined his head in return. "We noticed you left the ballroom alone. I trust you are admiring the wind's effect upon the ivy outside." Lillian Merrow folded her fan. "Monsieur Poirot, we were merely—" "Observing," Stockwell supplied smoothly. "The night air is quite fresh." His eyes flicked too, Poirot's moustache, as though sizing up the detective's next move. Poirot's smile was polite, but unreadable. "Of course, yet I cannot help but be curious about your conversation, monsieur, especially when it concerns timing related to this chandelier." He gestured behind them. "It is prudent we remain within earshot of those responsible for Madame Beaumont's safety." Lord Stockwell's face remained composed, but his eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "We meant no harm, detective. Our conversation pertained to an innocent matter, I assure you." Poirot's small grey eyes held his gaze. "Innocent matters do not often require whispered words or clandestine timing, monsieur." He turned to Hastings. "Shall we take our leave?" Together they departed with polite nods, leaving Stockwell and Merrow sharing a final terse glance. As they returned to the gallery, Hastings whispered, "He slipped something to her, a folded paper." Hastings reached down and pointed to a small scrap of parchment on the floor, partially hidden beneath Edgar's discarded glove. Hastings bent to retrieve it. Poirot watched the scribbled words catch the chandelier's sapphire light. Poirot produced a magnifying glass from his waistcoat, pocket expanding the note's cursive script. "Tonight, before the last waltz, meet by the west entrance. Opportunity awaits, RLM." Poirot's moustache twitched. RLM, that corresponds to Lillian's initials. This is evidence of some arrangement with Lord Stockwell. Hastings's brows rose. What opportunity, Poirot, to tamper with the chandelier? Poirot folded the note gently. Perhaps. Or to retrieve something from the gallery. We must proceed wisely. For now, Hastings, I shall keep this note safe. We will observe during the final dance, but we must not alert the conspirators. He placed the note in a discreet inner pocket, pressing his lips together thoughtfully. The orchestra's music swelled as the fourth waltz began in the ballroom. Serenading strings drifted down the corridor. Poirot and Hastings exchanged a meaningful glance before stepping back into the gallery, blending with a handful of other guests who lingered at its edge. They watched as Lillian Merrow, in her pale, rose gown, glided into the gallery, her eyes flicking to the chandelier, and then quickly back to her partner, Lord Stockwell. "Stay close," Poirot muttered to Hastings. "We must see what transpires when the final crescendo falls." Within moments, the ballroom's candles dimmed slightly as the orchestra's crescendo built. Inside the gallery, Lillian and Stockwell paused under the chandelier's sapphire radiance. Lillian's gloved hand slid from her partner's arm, and she took a hesitant step toward the pedestal. Lord Stockwell followed behind, eyes fixed upon the gem-laden fixture. Poirot allowed his gaze to soften, concealing his intent. Hastings, to his right, took a half-step forward. He could now distinguish the faint smear of grease Poirot had noted earlier, glistening near the chain intersecting the ceramic ceiling rose. The two conspirators reached the pedestal, their silhouettes framed by azure flecks. Lillian's voice was barely a whisper. The note said before the last waltz, "Are we too late?" Stockwell's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Not yet. Wait for the count of 3. He raised his hand and pressed a hidden latch near the gallery's side wall. The ivy concealed a small panel that opened, revealing the dark niche beyond. Lillian hesitated, her breath catching. Stockwell placed a finger to her lips. 3, 2, 1. At that moment, Poirot raised his cane. "Hold, if you please." His voice carried clarity and cold resolve. Stockwell and Merrow froze beneath the chandelier's glimmer. Hastings stepped forward simultaneously, seizing the latch panel. "Monsieur Stockwell, Miss Merrow, what is the meaning of this?" Stockwell's confident mask faltered. It is nothing, detective. We simply sought private conversation." Poirot's grey eyes flicked between them. "Indeed, yet your note speaks of opportunity. And opportunity near this chandelier may involve more than words. Do you deny intent to tamper with the fixture?" Lillian's face paled, her voice trembling. "We had no wish to harm the chandelier, Monsieur Poirot, but Mother's reputation compelled me to retrieve certain letters hidden within one sapphire's setting. Letters proving my family's innocence in the land dispute. I believed if I could find those letters, it would restore our good name." Poirot regarded her with measured sympathy. Letters? Within the chandelier? That seems improbable. Lillian's gaze dropped. Frederick discovered them when Chandelier first arrived. He wished to protect the family's secrets. He slipped them to me in exchange for forgiving our ancestors' mistakes. When Lord Stockwell offered assistance, I agreed, believing he could navigate this manor's secrets. Poirot's moustache twitched in contemplation. Frederick and Lord Stockwell sought something from within this fixture, yet Frederick seemed entranced by its beauty. Why would he hide letters here? Lillian's tears fell. Whenever the Beaumonts first acquired the chandelier, Sir Reginald entrusted certain documents to the jeweller for safekeeping. The jeweller, instead, hid them within a hollow sapphire. Frederick found them on a later inspection, letters proving a Merrow ancestor had been wronged by the Beaumont line. He wished to reveal the truth to heal old wounds. I only wish to obtain the proof discreetly. Hastings shook his head. But these letters would be evidence for any Beaumont to release. Why risk the chandelier's integrity? Lillian covered her face. I did not know the danger. Edgar would be hurt by this betrayal. I only sought justice. Poirot folded his hands behind his back. And Stockwell? What was his role? Lord Stockwell's eyes narrowed, but he conceded. I sought personal gain. The letters would serve as leverage to force a favourable business arrangement with the Merrows once they reclaimed their land. But I did not intend to harm the chandelier, only to extract the letter and return the sapphire, concealing any evidence. Poirot inclined his head. Your actions have jeopardized more than secrets. This chandelier is the heart of this evening's celebration, a gift to Madame Beaumont and to memory. Stockwell bowed his head. I apologize, monsieur. I see now I was blinded by opportunity. Hastings stepped forward, taking a firm hold of Stockwell's arm. You will remain here until we retrieve Frederick for questioning. Poirot turned to Lillian. Madam, you may return to the ballroom. I sense Madame Beaumont would wish to know of this matter privately. Lillian nodded, wiping her tears with a lace handkerchief. Her rose-gold hair shimmered under the chandelier's light as she drifted back towards the dancers. Stockwell, escorted by Hastings, offered a final rueful glance upward. The chandelier remains intact at least. Poirot's small smile was gentle, intact indeed, but tarnished in trust. Now we must locate Frederick and discern his motives fully before presenting the full truth to Madame Beaumont. As the orchestra's last notes faded and the final waltz began, Poirot allowed the music to carry him back into the ballroom. The crowd had taken notice of the brief interruption. Hushed whispers spread like ripples across the polished oak floor. Under the sapphire chandelier's shimmering glow, guests exchanged glances brimming with questions. Yet in the centre of it all, Poirot sensed that light still held dominion over darkness, provided one wielded observation, compassion, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. Chapter 9. Buried Truths. The heavy curtains in Rosalind Beaumont's private sitting room were drawn tightly, casting the chamber in a soft twilight, even as the waning moon slipped through clouds outside. Rosalind sat at her desk, fingertips resting lightly on the arms of her chair as she considered the evening's events. The ballroom's laughter and music had faded hours ago, but the gallery's sapphire glow still shimmered faintly through the corridor. as though unwilling to relinquish its vigil. Edgar stood near the window, gazing at the manicured gardens. Below, while Lydia paced quietly behind Rosalind's chair, anxiety etched on her face. "The matter grows more complex," Rosalind whispered, her voice hardly more than a breath. "Frederick remains missing, and now the truth of our family's history threatens to unravel our unity." Her fingers gripped the desk's polished surface. "We must find him and discover exactly what letters he has hidden." Edgar turned from the window, his expression resolute yet troubled. "I will search for him, sister. He must not remain silent. If those letters reveal something about our land dispute with the Merrows, we must know the truth before forging any path forward." He squared his shoulders and crossed to the door. "Lydia, lock this room behind me. I will return with news." Lydia nodded, her eyes shining with worry. "Be careful, Edgar. The night is late, and the grounds are vast." Edgar offered a reassuring smile as he slipped from the room. The door clicked behind him. Alone, Rosalind inhaled a steadying breath. "Poirot must help us manage whatever emerges. For now, I shall await his counsel." She rose, smoothing the embroidery on her gown, and moved to stand near the window, where the moonlight played across her features. A single knock at the door startled her, and Lydia entered, glancing toward the corridor. "Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings are here to see you," Lydia said softly, closing the door behind her. Rosalind nodded. "Show them in." Moments later, Poirot and Hastings stepped through the threshold. Poirot's eyes were bright, his posture calm yet alert, while Hastings' cheerful countenance was shaded by concern. "Madam," Poirot began, inclining his head with courtesy, "I trust you have slept, however fitfully." Rosalind gave a small wry smile. "Hardly, Monsieur Poirot. The evening's revelations weigh heavily upon us. Have you any news of Frederick?" Poirot shook his head slowly. "Not yet, madame. When I left him near the gallery earlier, he appeared intent on retrieving something from the chandelier. I then noticed he slipped away under the pretence of fresh air. But I followed at a discreet distance, and he did not return. I fear he may have gone to hide somewhere he believed secure." He folded his hands. "If he wishes to preserve these letters in secrecy, he will not reveal himself lightly." Hastings stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Rosalind, if Frederick harbours evidence that the Merrows were wronged, we must learn its contents. Only then can we decide whether to release it or keep it private." He looked to Poirot. "Can you suggest where he might be hiding?" Poirot's moustache twitched in thought. "Frederick spoke of the 3 pavilions in the rose garden, if I recall. He admired ivy-covered alcoves from childhood, and the gardeners mention he knows these grounds intimately. I suggest we search there first." He glanced at Rosalind. "With your permission, madam, Captain Hastings and I will seek him out." Rosalind inclined her head gravely. "Yes, but please be cautious. I fear Frederick's intentions are noble, yet the ramifications may be dire." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Very well. We shall depart at once." Hastings moved to follow, but Rosalind held a hand to his arm. "Take Lydia with you, Hastings. If Frederick aims to return to the gallery, Lydia may calm him." She glanced at Lydia. "Your presence will reassure him. He need not hide his heritage in darkness." Lydia nodded, resolute, and followed Hastings as they slipped from the sitting-room. Poirot lingered a moment, offering Rosalind a reassuring smile. Fear not, madame. The truth, however inconvenient, sets a family upon the path of honesty. We shall guide Master Frederick to that path." Outside, the night's chill deepened as Poirot, Hastings, and Lydia strolled through the moonlit corridor toward the rose garden. The gallery door, still ajar, allowed a final glimmer of sapphire light to pool on the floor. Poirot paused to glance back, then stepped quietly onto the gravel path leading to the garden's pavilion wing. "Captain Hastings," Poirot whispered. "His plan to retrieve those letters may have been hastened by Lord Stockwell's interference. We must find him before any harm befalls him, or the documents." Hastings nodded, and they followed the winding path between rows of trimmed hedges that gleamed silvery under the moon. The rose garden's air was heavy with fragrance, each bloom pawning its secrets to the night. In the moonlight, 3 small pavilions nestled beneath arches of climbing roses, their lattice frames dappled with blooms that felt almost unreal in the pale haze. Frederick, attired in a light coat and breeches, stood beside the central pavilion. He held one hand to his forehead and peered up as though seeking answers from the chandelier's sapphire luminescence still visible through a garden window. Poirot stepped forward. "Monsieur Frederick, I entreat you to come forth. You have caused much distress by hiding these letters. We only wish to understand their contents." Frederick turned, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, I did not expect you to follow so swiftly." He stepped back, glancing anxiously toward the gallery. "I was afraid that if I brought these letters to Rosalind by day, they would be dismissed as the sentiments of a rival family. But you intercepted Lillian and Stockwell. If they gained these letters, the terms would be decided for the Merrows, leaving the Beaumonts with a grievous burden." Poirot regarded him with measured compassion. "Tell me of the letters, Frederick. Their contents will determine what must be done." Frederick hesitated, then withdrew a folded packet from his coat. He extended it to Poirot. When the chandelier first arrived from Ceylon, a jeweller discovered these documents in a hollow sapphire. They were addressed from Joseph Merrow, dated 1823, to Sir Reginald Beaumont. They detail a land sale between our ancestors. Joseph Merrow was misled by a forged contract and received far less compensation than agreed. He pleaded for Sir Reginald's honour to restore fairness, but the documents vanished. I found his original plea here, among the stones." Poirot gently accepted the packet and unfolded the brittle parchment under the pavilion's minimal lantern glow. His small eyes scanned the elegant script. "Know that I, Joseph Merrow, dear friend, entrusted you with my family's legacy and sought equitable terms. Yet I have been deceived by forged seals. Let no man lose his honour over this deceit. Should these words be lost, may this chandelier serve as testament to my family's claim. Yours truly, J. Merrow." Poirot looked up at Frederick. "These letters prove the Merrow claim to that parcel of land adjoins the West Wing, now part of your father's holdings. They compel an equitable settlement, failure of which would stain Sir Reginald's legacy." Frederick's gaze fell, but if revealed, the Beaumont estate might be forced to relinquish land that provides substantial income. Rosalind will not accept this without protest. He turned, eyes brimming with uncertainty. I could not bear to face her without proof, yet hiding here has caused so much harm. Lydia stepped forward. "Frederick, dear cousin, we are your family. If this truth demands resolution, let us address it together." Her voice was a soothing balm in the night air. "Rosalind must know. We cannot continue upon a foundation built on deceit." Hastings placed a supportive hand on Frederick's shoulder. "Your intentions were honourable, Frederick. You sought justice for the Merrows, and integrity for the Beaumonts. It is time to bring this into the open." Frederick nodded, exhaling. "Then I shall accompany you back to the manor. But I fear Lady Pennington's counsel will be required. Her wisdom in familial matters often guides Rosaline's judgment." He slipped the letters into his coat and followed Poirot, Hastings, and Lydia. They returned to the manor's rear door and entered the stillened corridor, moving quietly to avoid waking any servants. Poirot led them directly to Rosalind's sitting room. He rapped lightly, and the door opened to reveal Rosalind, pale yet determined. "Monsieur Poirot, you found him?" Her voice trembled with relief. "Yes, madame," Poirot replied gently. "Frederick stands ready to speak to you. Please receive him with an open heart." Frederick stepped forward, offering the packet of letters. Rosalind's eyes widened as she recognized his features. "Frederick!" She embraced him swiftly, then drew back, smoothing her gown. "You must explain." He drew a steadying breath. "Sister, I apologize for causing you worry. These letters were meant to reveal an injustice done to the Merrows. I found them hidden in the sapphire chandelier. Joseph Merrow's plea for equitable land sale was usurped by a forged contract. I believed you to be unaware, so I sought to keep them safe until the moment was right. But I feared Lillian and Lord Stockwell would exploit this truth for their own ends." Rosalind regarded the letters trembling in her hands. She unfolded them slowly, reading each sentence as though it was a blade, carving through her certainty. When she finished, she looked up at Frederick, tears in her eyes. "I had no idea. Father never spoke of this. How could our family carry on as though nothing was amiss?" Hastings placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Madame, your father may not have known. This forged contract could easily have been concealed from him." Poirot nodded, his eyes kind. "Indeed, justice demands that you confront this matter with clarity. The Merrows have rightful claim. Though the land in question is a small portion, it carries symbolic weight. Robert Merrow's descendants deserve recognition." Rosalind exhaled, her composure returning. "Very well. Then, in the morning, we shall confer with Lady Pennington, Mr. Carmichael, and the Merrows to negotiate a settlement. I shall rectify this betrayal." Frederick's relief was evident. Lydia embraced him, and Rosalind regarded both of them. "Thank you, Frederick. You have honoured our family by bringing truth to light." She turned toward Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you everything. Without you, I would not have known my own history." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, it was Frederick's courage that illuminated the path. I merely observed." He inclined his head. "Now, all truths are unveiled, and it is upon you to decide the family's future. May your decisions be guided by justice and compassion." Rosalind nodded, folding the letters carefully. "I will not rest until this matter is resolved fully." She looked once more at Frederick and Lydia. "Come, let us rest. Tomorrow's dawn will bring both challenge and hope." As the hour grew late, Poirot and Hastings took their leave, stepping back into the silent corridor. Lydia closed Rosalind's sitting-room door behind them, and a hush fell over the manor. Outside, the moon drifted behind a veil of clouds, leaving the sapphire chandelier's glow to fade slowly into memory. Poirot gave a final glance toward the gallery, its secrets now laid bare. He smiled softly to himself. And thus, Hastings, the buried truths have emerged from sapphire stones. Hastings rested a hand on Poirot's shoulder. Another mystery revealed, my friend. Yet I sense the family's story still has many chapters to be written. Poirot nodded, his gaze warm. Indeed, Hastings. But now at least the truth shines as brightly as any sapphire. With that, they departed into the night, leaving Beaumont Manor to its slumbering embodiment of both legacy and renewal. Chapter 10. Morning's Reckoning. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of the great hall, illuminating the polished oak floors and the reflections of candle sconces still affixed along the walls. Birds chirped in the gardens beyond, and the soft hum of servants preparing breakfast drifted through the corridor. Rosalind Beaumont stood near a large table, where parchment and ledgers lay spread, each awaiting signatures and marginal notes. She glanced toward the doorway as Lady Pennington entered, her sapphire teardrop brooch catching the light. "Lady Pennington," Rosalind greeted, inclining her head with respectful warmth. "Thank you for coming so promptly." Lady Pennington closed the door behind her, her manner composed but concerned. "Madame Beaumont, I received word of your request last night and came at once. It appears family history demands swift address." Rosalind nodded. Indeed, these letters Frederick discovered within the chandelier reveal the Beaumonts' ancestral deceit. I intend to meet with Reverend Arthur Merrow and Sir Reginald's solicitor, Mr. Carmichael, to negotiate a settlement today, but I do not wish to proceed without your counsel." Lady Pennington surveyed the documents, then offered a gentle smile. "Let me know how I may assist." Rosalind arranged the parchments neatly in a stack. "First, I shall travel to the Merrow estate this afternoon, accompanied by Frederick, Edgar, and Hastings. I wish to present a gesture of goodwill, transfer of the disputed land parcel, along with a modest financial endowment for the Merrow heirs." She paused. "I fear the Merrows may harbour bitterness after 2 centuries of perceived wrongs. I need your guidance in bridging that divide." Lady Pennington placed a hand on Rosalind's arm. "Your honesty and transparency already signify your sincerity. The Merrows will recognize that." Rosalind inhaled deeply. "I hope so. Please, join us at Carmichael's office at 2 o'clock. I must attend now to my guests' refreshments. Will you accompany me to set the table?" "Of course," Lady Pennington replied. They moved to the sideboard, where silver trays awaited fresh fruit and pastries. As they worked, servants, maids, and footmen moved about, their hushed chatter punctuated by porcelain clinks. In the gallery, Hastings and Poirot consulted the ledger's final entries. Poirot's keen gaze rested on marginal notes. Colonel Henry Beaumont's earlier attempt to conceal parts of the land deed in 1823. Hastings pointed to a line. "This indicates Sir Reginald granted the land to the Merrows after discovering, but the forgery, yet that amendment was never publicised." He looked up at Poirot. "Why conceal an honourable act?" Poirot tapped the ledger lightly. Because pride and reputation guided his family, he wished to right his wrong quietly, without scandal. The revelation of a hidden correction threatened the Beaumont name in polite society. Thus, the ledger change was made, but no announcement followed. The Merrows, believing themselves cheated, never saw the amended deed. Hastings's brows knit. So the Merrows' bitterness grew from lack of information. Exactment. Their rightful claim was settled in private, but the secrecy bred resentment through generations. Now we must restore truth openly. Poirot closed the ledger. Let us prepare to accompany Rosalind. We must ensure no further obstacles arise. At 2 o'clock, Rosalind, Frederick, Edgar, Hastings, and Poirot assembled in the study. Mr. Carmichael, an austere gentleman with spectacles perched on his nose, waited beside a leather-bound desk, his quill poised over a fresh piece of parchment. Reverend Arthur Merrow, a dignified man of gentle countenance, stood near the window, adjusting his clerical collar. He smiled warmly when Rosalind approached. "Madame Beaumont," Reverend Merrow said, inclining his head. "Thank you for coming. I trust Frederick is well." Frederick stepped forward, inclining his head respectfully. "Yes, Reverend. I apologize for my abrupt departure last night. I only sought the truth." Reverend Merrow offered a fatherly smile. "Your courage honors your family." Mr. Carmichael scanned the assembled party, including Edgar and Lady Pennington, who had arrived shortly after. "Shall we begin?" he inquired, gesturing toward a polished table where an amended land deed awaited signatures. Rosalind nodded. "Yes, I propose we start by acknowledging the mistake openly." She stood before the table. "Reverend Merrow, Mr. Carmichael, I, Rosalind Beaumont, heir of the Beaumont estate, stand before you to rectify an ancestral wrong. These letters, from Joseph Merrow to my ancestor Sir Reginald Beaumont, were found within a sapphire chandelier last night. They prove the Merrows were deceived by a forged contract in 1823. I apologize for my family's silence and the pain it caused." Reverend Merrow offered a gentle bow. "Madame, your honesty is more than enough. The Merrows never sought vengeance, only recognition." Rosalind took a steadying breath. "In recognition, I hereby transfer Parcel C, 1,000 acres adjoining the Merrow estate, to the Reverend Merrow Trust. Additionally, I allocate £5,000 as an endowment for the Merrow Charitable Fund." Mr. Carmichael dipped his quill in ink. "If the parties agree, I shall draft the deed." He addressed Reverend Merrow. "Will you accept these terms on behalf of the Merrows?" Reverend Merrow glanced at Frederick. "Frederick, I know the weight this resolution carries." Frederick inclined his head. "Reverend, I endorse this and trust you to use these resources wisely." Reverend Merrow's warm eyes met Rosalind's. "On behalf of the Merrow family, I accept your offer with gratitude. The charity will uplift poor families in the region, just as Joseph Merrow intended." He extended his hand to Mr. Carmichael, who dipped the quill and began writing. While the deed was drafted, Edgar escorted Lady Pennington aside. "Thank you for your support," he whispered. "Without your counsel, my sister might have faltered." Lady Pennington smiled. "You have shown bravery, Edgar. Now we must heal the wounds and look forward." She patted his arm. "You will make your family proud." As Mr. Carmichael finished, Rosalind and Reverend Merrow signed the deed. Witnessed by Edgar, Carmichael, and Hastings, the document was absolute. Parcel C belonged to the Merrow Trust. Frederick's chest heaved with relief as he offered a grateful nod to his cousin. Mr. Carmichael cleared his throat. "And now, Madame Beaumont, your signature here shall finalize the matter." Rosalind dipped the quill and added her name, Rosalind Beaumont, to the deed. She exhaled, her face flushed with resolve. Hastings lifted his pen, adding his signature as a witness, and Lady Pennington's cursive followed. "The matter is settled," Reverend Merrow declared, folding the documents. "Peace shall govern the future relations of our families." A hush fell as all present absorbed the significance. Frederick smiled, relief and pride mingling in his expression. Edgar stepped forward. "Reverend, on behalf of my family, I extend our deepest gratitude. We pledge to honor these new terms and never conceal such truths again." Reverend Merrow inclined his head. "The Merrows, too, shall approach this union with warmth and generosity." He turned to Frederick. "Your actions have guided us toward reconciliation." Frederick bowed. "I only sought the path of truth." Poirot, standing near the window, offered a discreet nod of approval. Hastings clapped Frederick on the back. "Well done, cousin! Now, shall we return to Beaumont Manor and resume our celebration with peace restored?" Rosalind smiled, her eyes bright. "Yes, let us proceed." The group rose and moved to leave the study. But Edgar hesitated. "Carmichael," Edgar said, "I would ask one more question. What of the Marinov collection's interest in the chandeliers? Sapphires? A cousin in Geneva inquired last night whether one gem could be sold discreetly." He risked a glance at Poirot. Mr. Carmichael's expression grew serious. "I, too, received a letter from a representative of the Marinov family. They offered a substantial sum for a single sapphire. However, after last night's disruptions, their interest waned. They desire provenance, but fear scandal." Rosalind frowned. "Scandal we shall not provide." She glanced at Poirot. "Is there anything else we must address about the chandelier?" Poirot's small grey eyes met hers. "Madame, the chandelier remains secure. No further tampering has occurred since the morning inspection. The Marinov concern can be allayed by offering them a tour, should they wish to see the chandelier in its rightful place." He turned to Hastings. "The last loose thread is this. We must inform the jeweller, Monsieur Favreau, that no further extraction attempts will be made. Then the chandelier can remain untouched." Hastings nodded. "I will draft a brief note to Monsieur Favreau, emphasizing the chandelier's importance as an heirloom." Edgar added, "And I shall ensure no one sells a sapphire without proper consultation. The chandelier's integrity must be preserved for the Beaumont legacy." Rosalind placed a hand on Edgar's arm. "Thank you, Edgar." Then, addressing all, she said, "With this matter resolved, let us return home and resume our celebration. Tonight, we dine at the Great Hall in honour of reconciliation." Reverend Merrow offered a gentle bow. "I shall join you for the feast. The Merrows deserve a place at the table," Lady Pennington added, "and we shall raise our glasses to truth and unity." Everyone nodded in agreement, a sense of hopeful anticipation rippling through the room. As they departed Carmichael's office, Rosalind paused in the doorway, looking back at the deed lying on the desk. She inhaled deeply, steadying her resolve, then turned to lead the procession outside. Sunlight bathed the corridor as they strode toward the waiting carriage, its polished panels reflecting the morning's brilliance. The carriage wheels clacked on the cobblestones as they set off toward Beaumont Manor, where a banquet awaited. Inside, the great hall was decorated with fresh garlands of roses and ivy, and chairs had been arranged on either side of long oak tables. Guests, now including Reverend Merrow, Lady Pennington, and members of the Merrow family, filled the benches, their faces brimming with camaraderie and relief. The gallery doors were closed, but through the open arch, the chandelier's sapphire glow filtered faintly, a silent testament to the truth uncovered within its prisms. Rosalind ascended the dais and tapped a polished wine-glass. "Dear friends and family," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "Today we honor our shared history and embrace a future founded on transparency and goodwill. To the Merrows, we offer our sincere gratitude, and to all, we dedicate this banquet in celebration of truth, reconciliation, and the bonds that unite us." A cheer rose, glasses were lifted, and a ripple of applause swept through the hall. Frederick beamed at his cousin's affirmation. Edgar stood proudly beside Rosalind, and Reverend Merrow raised his goblet in acknowledgment. Poirot, seated at the head table beside Lady Pennington and Hastings, raised his glass with measured poise. "To Beaumont and Merrow, may this union endure like the sapphires above us, pure, brilliant, and unwavering." The hall responded with joyful echo. The feast commenced. Laughter and conversation filled the great hall, weaving a tapestry of renewed trust. Through archways and corridors, servants moved with grace, ensuring each cup remained full and every plate replenished. The gallery doors stayed securely closed, but the memory of the chandelier's glimmer remained in every smile, every clink of crystal, and every shared glance. That evening, beneath the gentle hum of voices and the scent of roasted meats and spiced pies, the Beaumont and Merrow families began writing a new chapter, one illuminated not by hidden sapphires, but by the clear light of truth and unity. And in the depths of Beaumont Manor, the now quiet gallery awaited its next witness, secure in the knowledge that no secret could remain hidden forever against the sharp eyes of conscience and the enduring will to reconcile. Chapter 11. Echoes of Conscience. The sun's afternoon warmth filtered through the tall windows of Beaumont Manor, casting gentle patterns across the library's polished oak floor. Servants moved with hushed efficiency, yet the atmosphere carried a relaxed air. The tension of the previous days had eased into a calm anticipation. Many rooms hummed with quiet conversation, but it was here, in the library, that Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings convened for their final consultation before departing the estate. Poirot stood by a mahogany bookshelf, his small grey eyes alight with reflection, as he fingered a leather-bound volume. Hastings, seated at a window seat upholstered in emerald velvet, sipped a final cup of tea, its steam curling in the soft light. The sprawling rose gardens outside shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, their blooms nodding gently in a mild breeze. "Mon ami," Hastings began, setting his cup on a carved side table, "it is curious to think that the chandelier's secrets have all been revealed. The family arranges its affairs with sincerity, and the Merrows appear content with the settlement. Yet I sense that something still lingers beneath the surface." He rose to pace the length of the room, brushing his hand along the bookshelf, as though seeking a particular title. Poirot closed the book he held and regarded Hastings thoughtfully. "Indeed, Hastings, the outward resolution is sound. The establishment of the Merrow Trust and transfer of the land grant brought tangible justice. Yet emotional reverberations, the echoes of conscience, persist in each heart touched by these events." He tapped a finger to his moustache. "Consider Frederick. Though he fulfilled his duty by revealing the letters, he now grapples with anxiety over how his actions altered family dynamics. Such guilt does not dissipate with a signature." Hastings nodded, and Rosalind, despite her composure, carries the weight of ancestral deceit. She must rebuild her trust in tradition without castigation, something not easily done. He paused at the window, watching a garden bench where Lydia and Edgar conferred in subdued tones. "Look at them. They plot the Rosebed's redesign, something innocuous, but perhaps symbolic of forthcoming renewal." Poirot smiled gently. "Oui, Hastings. The Rosebed is being redesigned to include blue irises, Rosalind's favourite, and silver-leafed heuchera, reflecting the chandelier's hues. Thus, they weave symbols of the old and new. Yet let us not overlook Mr. Felworth's concerns. I overheard him last night expressing unease that the butler's role had shifted permanently, and that he might be asked to assume greater responsibility." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "An interesting observation. Felworth's unassuming. Nature belies ambition or perhaps fear of overstepping his station. Should we speak with him before departing, Poirot?" "Assuredly," Poirot replied. He opened a set of French windows, allowing a flood of warm air to mingle with the scent of roses. "Let us also ensure that no further ripples from the chandeliers, a rival propagate through the staff or villagers who once benefited from Lady Beaumont's charity." They left the library and traversed a quiet corridor toward the servants' wing. At the far end, near a collection of brass keys hanging beside a painted door, they found Mr. Felworth engaged in polishing a silver sconce. His expression shifted when he saw Poirot and Hastings approaching, and he set the polisher aside with a careful motion. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, what brings you here?" Felworth asked, voice steady, though his brow creased slightly. Poirot inclined his head with characteristic courtesy. "Monsieur Felworth, we wish to ensure that you have no unresolved concerns regarding your duties or the recent events. You bear new responsibilities with the departure of Mr. Banks. Do you find yourself uncertain in any regard?" Felworth's eyes flicked toward a nearby tapestry depicting a Beaumont ancestor. He hesitated before answering. "Monsieur Poirot, I appreciate your concern. Mr. Banks's departure has indeed affected the household's rhythms. Some staff members look to me for guidance, and I'm not entirely certain how to fill his shoes. Yet I feel honoured to serve more directly under Madame Beaumont's trust." Hastings stepped closer. "Have you any lingering worries, perhaps about the chandelier or the family's welfare? Your insight would be invaluable." Felworth's posture relaxed. "The chandelier itself remains secure, monsieur. Madame Beaumont entrusted me with its care overnight, and no incident occurred. My greater worry is maintaining the staff's morale. They fear that the family's ordeal may reflect poorly on their own positions." He paused, choosing words carefully. "If I may speak candidly, I fear they attribute too much blame to themselves, especially Lydia, who overheard whispers. They view her as a guardian of secrets, though she only acted out of loyalty. Poirot's moustache quivered with empathy. Madame Beaumont values each member of her household dearly. I will convey your concerns to her. In the meantime, continue to guide the staff with kindness and firm resolve. Felworth inclined his head gratefully. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I shall do my utmost. As they departed, Hastings murmured, Felworth's loyalty will strengthen the household, provided he receives proper guidance. Poirot smiled. Precisely. Now, let us visit the gardeners and ensure no unexpected discoveries linger amidst the blooms. They strolled through the gardens, where Craddock and several assistants were busy trimming roses and planting the new irises. Frederick supervised from a distance, occasionally offering advice. Edgar directed one pair of gardeners toward a small plot in the shade, suggesting they relocate a cluster of ferns near the reflecting pool. Lydia knelt to inspect a newly placed iris, smoothing the soil around its base. Poirot approached Frederick. Monsieur Frederick, how do you find the garden's new design? Does it satisfy your vision? Frederick's face brightened. Oui, monsieur. Incorporating the chandelier's colours into the flower beds brings a sense of unity. Our family's legacy now blooms with new purpose. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. A very fine gesture. And the letters, have they been secured for preservation? Frederick touched a small pouch hanging at his waist. Monsieur Favreau offered to create a protective case for them. They will be displayed in the local archives under Reverend Merrow's stewardship. Thus, the truth remains accessible for posterity. Hastings clapped him on the shoulder. Well done, Frederick. Your judicious actions ensure that the past informs the future without afflicting it. Frederick gave a humble smile. I only did what needed to be done. He glanced toward the reflecting pool, its surface rippling gently. And now, I wish to support my sister and our cousin Edgar in any way I can. Poirot's gaze softened. Then let your energy cultivate unity rather than discord. Your family's bond will flourish, as does this garden under your careful watch. He turned to Hastings. We have satisfied all tangible matters. Now, let us ensure Madame's emotional well-being before we depart. They returned to the main entrance, where Rosalind awaited beside a marble bust of Sir Reginald. Her expression was calm, though her dark eyes held a touch of lingering concern. Edgar stood at her side, and Lady Pennington bowed in quiet reverence. Madam, Poirot began warmly, I trust you find the new land settlement suitable. Rosalind offered a gentle nod. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. The deed is in Reverend Merrow's care, and the Merrow Trust's Children's Fund flourishes under his guidance. Yet I find myself reflecting on my family's history and my responsibilities as custodian. I wonder whether I have the strength to uphold our legacy with clarity. Poirot's moustache quivered in reassurance. Madame, you have acted with courage and honesty. The legacy of the Beaumonts, like all legacies, must adapt to the present while honouring the past. You possess both wisdom and compassion qualities that ensure your stewardship remains sound. Hastings stepped forward. Rosalind, your willingness to right ancestral wrongs has already brought remarkable healing. Take a moment to appreciate that. He gestured toward Lady Pennington, who added, Indeed, dear child, your grace under pressure assures us all that the Beaumont name continues in trustworthy hands. Rosalind exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "Thank you, my friends. Your counsel steadies me." She turned to Edgar, who offered her his arm. "Will you accompany me to the garden's unveiling ceremony for the new iris bed?" Edgar inclined his head. "I would be honored." As they strolled toward the rose garden, Poirot and Hastings exchanged quiet appreciation for the family's resilience. Poirot's small grey eyes alighted on the irises fluttering in gentle breezes, their sapphire blue petals gleaming in sunlight. "How fitting," Poirot murmured, "that from fractured sapphires came the seeds of renewal. And now the iris blooms to remind all that beauty and truth can emerge from darkness." Hastings nodded, his gaze steady on the thriving garden. "And that, my friend, is the greatest reward of all, witnessing harmony restored." Poirot's moustache quivered in final affirmation. "We, in this garden and in this family, the echoes of conscience now rest peacefully, having guided each soul toward clarity and compassion. And so ends our chapter at Beaumont Manor." They watched as Rosalind and Edgar knelt to plant the final iris, their faces illuminated by genuine contentment. Lydia stood nearby, her hand resting on her cousin's shoulder, both smiling at this moment of unspoken renewal. Beyond them, the sapphire chandelier's glow had faded from memory, yet its influence endured in every bloom and every heart reconciled. And as Hastings and Poirot departed through the stately front doors of Beaumont Manor, the sun sank toward the horizon, casting long, peaceful shadows. The manor stood as a testament to truth's enduring power, a place where echoes of conscience had shaped destinies, and where a family's legacy reached forward, rooted firmly in the soil of honesty and compassion. Chapter 12. Departure in Tranquility. Sun shone brightly over the gravel courtyard of Beaumont Manor, and the scent of roses lingered in the warm morning air. Carriages waited at the entrance, their polished wheels reflecting sunlight as servants loaded suitcases and parcels. Inside the great hall, the remaining members of the Beaumont household gathered at the long oak table, now arranged for a simple, farewell breakfast. Rosalind Beaumont stood at the head of the table, her ivory morning gown delicate against the dark wood. Beside her, Edgar, Frederick and Lydia arranged plates of freshly baked rolls, jars of preserves, and steaming cups of coffee. Lady Pennington, Reverend Merrow, Mr. Carmichael, and Major Beaumont took seats, their expressions serene but tinged with regret at this morning's departures. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings entered more quietly than usual, Poirot's moustache gleaming with a faint sparkle of satisfaction. Hastings carried his travel bag, and behind them followed Mr. Felworth, who had been charged with seeing them off. Rosalind greeted them with a warm smile, though a trace of wistfulness lingered in her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Rosalind said, her voice steady but kind. "Thank you for your vigilance and friendship. This breakfast is in your honour." Poirot inclined his head with graceful gratitude. "Madame, the honour is mine. To witness your family's fortitude has been a privilege. May I present you with a small token of my esteem?" He produced from his coat an intricately bound volume, his own personal notebook, filled with observations, sketches of the manor's floor plans, and thoughtful reflections on every clue he uncovered during the case. I hope these notes will remind you of the lessons learned beneath the sapphire chandelier." Rosalind's eyes lit with emotion as she accepted the gift. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. This will be cherished." Hastings rose and uncapped the silver flask. "In addition," he said with a grin, "I bring this modest silver flask from Captain Hastings, to be used at future family gatherings, perhaps to toast continued harmony and good fortune." Frederick and Edgar exchanged amused glances as Hastings passed the flask to Rosalind. "We shall use it well," Edgar promised, offering a bow. Major Beaumont tapped his cup gently. "Permit me, then, to propose a short toast." He lifted his teacup to honesty, which heals wounds, to family, which forges bonds, and to Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, whose skill restored balance to our home. May your journeys be safe, and your investigations ever rewarding. A chorus of agreement followed. Rosalind touched her cup to both Poirot and Hastings. "To your health and friendship." After the toast, Rosalind stepped aside, and Lydia approached with a small leather-bound card. She handed it to Hastings. "Captain, this is the address of our family's estate at Greystone Manor, Dorset. Should you and Monsieur Poirot ever wish to visit, please consider yourselves welcome guests." Hastings smiled broadly. "We shall not soon forget your kindness and hospitality." He placed the card gently into his coat pocket. Mr. Carmichael folded his hands and spoke with measured gravitas. "Before you depart, there remains the matter of the charity accounts and the final payment to the Merrow Trust. The funds have been transferred, and I have a receipt here for Madame Beaumont." He extended a parchment scroll. Rosalind took it, reading the formal acknowledgment. "All is in order," he confirmed. "With that, our legal obligations are fulfilled." Reverend Merrow stood and clasped Rosalind's hand. "Madame, I shall see that the Children's Fund serves its purpose. Thank you for your generosity and integrity." Rosalind nodded with a gentle smile. "Thank you, Reverend." She turned to Poirot. "If I may ask one final favour, would you and Captain Hastings join us for a tour of the gallery before you leave? I wish you to see how the chandelier rests now, secure and honoured." Poirot's eyes brightened. "With pleasure, madame." They rose and followed Frederick through a side door into the corridor. The gallery doors stood open, and the midday sun streamed through the skylight, casting prismatic patterns across the marble floor. The sapphire chandelier hung suspended above its pedestal, unblemished and radiant. Beneath it, 2 footlights had been placed so that any disturbance of the fixture would cast a telltale reflection, precaution that Poirot had arranged the previous evening. Edgar stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, you requested that I confirm the final inspection of the mounts?" He approached the bronze fitting and tapped its surface lightly. "As you see, the wax holds firmly, and no link bears a scratch or mark. I believe the chandelier rests as safely as any jewel could." Poirot circled beneath the chandelier, his cane tapping softly. "Exactement. The affixed lamps reflect off each sapphire, and the weight distribution is perfect. I sense no lingering risk." He paused, lifting his gaze. "This fixture has seen both dark designs and noble truth. Now it belongs solely to the light." Lydia stepped forward, smoothing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Monsieur Poirot, I will ensure that the chandelier receives weekly inspections and that no unauthorized person nears it." Poirot inclined his head. "A wise precaution, mademoiselle. The chandelier's beauty deserves vigilant care." Rosalind joined them, her hand resting lightly on the railings surrounding the pedestal. "We have decided to maintain an open gallery this afternoon, so villagers may glimpse this wonder. Your advice on the signage, 'In testimony of truth and justice,' will remain." Poirot offered a gentle smile. "It is a fitting inscription, Madame. May all who view this chandelier remember that light prevails over the shadows." As they exited the gallery, the elevator servant appeared, Mr. Craddock, the gardener, carrying his tools. He paused when he saw Poirot, bowing respectfully. "Monsieur Poirot, I will oversee the crowd's flow and ensure the audience maintains a respectful distance." Poirot nodded. "Merci, Monsieur Craddock. You have served with loyalty." Craddock's weathered face broke into a gentle smile. "It has been my privilege, monsieur." Back in the courtyard, the carriages waited and horses stamped softly on the cobblestones. Rosalind, Edgar, Frederick and Lydia surrounded Poirot and Hastings for a final farewell. Fitzwilliam, the head coachman, held the reins of the carriage that would carry the two detectives to Beauport Station. Rosalind pressed a rosebud into Poirot's hand. "For your journey," she said softly, "to remind you of Beaumont Manor and its gratitude." Poirot held the rosebud gently, touching a gloved finger to one velvety petal. "Madam, I accept this with the deepest appreciation." He offered a small bow. Hastings raised his hat. "From the bottom of my heart, thank you for a most unforgettable stay." Edgar offered his hand to Hastings. "Safe travels, Captain." Frederick and Lydia exchanged silent embraces with Hastings, and Lydia slid a sapphire brooch, one of the chandelier's smaller, non-priceless pendants, into Hastings's pocket as a keepsake. "For remembrance," she whispered. Hastings's eyes glistened. "I shall treasure it always." Rosalind and Edgar pressed Poirot's hands, then stepped back as Fitzwilliam announced, "All aboard." Hastings lifted the carriage door, and Poirot settled onto the cushioned seat beside him. Hastings leaned out to offer one final wave. Rosalind stood at the carriage's threshold, her ivory gown billowing gently in the breeze. "Goodbye, Monsieur Poirot. Goodbye, Captain Hastings," she called, her voice firm yet gentle. Poirot lifted his hat. "Farewell, madam, until we meet again under more tranquil skies." The carriage rolled forward down the gravel drive. Poirot gazed back at Beaumont Manor, its stone walls warm in the morning light. Hastings joined him by the window. "Mon ami, how shall you sum up this case?" Poirot's small grey eyes reflected satisfaction. "Hastings, this case has shown that truth, once hidden, even within a sapphire, must eventually emerge. The chandelier, originally a symbol of beauty, became a vessel for conflict. Yet in that conflict, grace and justice found their stage. The pieces were as fragile as sapphires, but the bonds of family proved stronger." Hastings nodded, the smile in his eyes mirroring his admiration. "And the chronicle of the sapphire?" Poirot gave a slight tap to the rosebud in his gloved hand. "It will remain a testament, a chapter in the lives of those who honour honesty above all. Now, let us journey homeward, for I suspect our next adventure awaits in London." the carriage turned toward Beauport Station, leaving behind the gardens, the gallery, and the lingering glow of the sapphire chandelier. As the manor receded from view, the morning's tranquillity settled over the countryside. The echoes of conscience had faded, replaced by the promise of new beginnings, both for the Beaumonts and for the detective whose keen mind had guided them through darkness into the light.